The House Committee on Elections will come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Shaheen.
Here.
Vice Chair Busey.
Here.
Representative Isaac. Representative Morales-Shaw. Representative Plaza. Here. Representative Raymond.
Here.
Representative Swanson.
Here.
Representative Toth. Representative Terry Wilson.
Here.
A quorum is present. Welcome members and staff on having the privilege to serve on elections. I want to personally thank Speaker Burrows for this appointment, and I'm very excited to work with each and every one of you to ensure that all eligible Texans can exercise the right to vote in secure elections. Voting is the foundation of our Republican democracy, and it's important that our constituents have confidence in our election process. When it comes to secure elections and efforts to fight voter fraud, Texas is a leader. Although there is important policy work ahead of us this legislative session, Texas has made great strides in election integrity, as we will see from today's testimony. A couple of housekeeping measures. This is our regular meeting, room and day. If it is possible that the meeting time may vary depending on our schedule on the floor. We are scheduled to meet at 10:30 or upon final adjournment or upon bill referral if permission is granted. Please be mindful of the number of members in the back room. We understand the need to step out for whatever reason. Just be sure that there are never 5 or more members at a time in the back room, as this would constitute a quorum and would violate our House rules. Please be mindful also that the microphones in front of you, and switch them to off when not in use. Otherwise, there will be feedback and you might say something embarrassing. As a reminder, this hearing is organizational in nature and will be invited testimony only. If you are testifying, please make sure you have filled out the electronic witness affirmation form on the registration kiosk in the hallway. If you have any questions filling out the form, please ask a staff member for help. Our new committee clerk I want to welcome is Ms. Kia Campos. And our new assistant clerk is Haley Fuller, and she's on her way. That is not Haley over there presently. But I'd like to welcome you all. Incredibly excited about this committee. And I'm pleased to have Representative Busey, my friend, as Vice Chair, and Vice Chairman Busey, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your appointment to chair this committee. I look forward to working with you and all of these committee members to safeguard every eligible Texan's freedom to vote. This is my 4th term on this committee. I know Rep. Swanson is on her 5th term on this committee, so we spent a lot of time here together. This is, with this work ahead of us, we have an opportunity to put politics aside and be intentional with the changes we make to the most essential systems of government we manage. An opportunity to stand with county officials and election workers who make our democracy possible. This committee has the chance to rise to the moment to put good policy over partisan gain and to ensure that every Texan, regardless of their zip code or circumstance, has a voice in shaping our future. Texas remains one of the most challenging states in which to vote, consistently ranking near the bottom in voter turnout, particularly among young Texans and people of color. This is unacceptable, I know, to all of us, so we must do better by developing policies that foster a healthy democracy. The right to vote is not just a box we check on Election Day, it's the guarantee that this government still belongs to the people. The urgency of protecting our elections cannot be overstated. The erosion of trust in our election system threatens the very foundation of our democracy. We must act decisively to restore and maintain confidence in our elections. I'm excited to work with you, Mr. Chairman, and every member of this committee to ensure that every eligible Texan can exercise their right to vote freely and equally, and I'm excited to get to work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, very much. I'd like to open up the floor for any members who would like to comment at this time. Mr. Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank the chair for giving me 2 voices here, 2 microphones.
You're soft speaker.
I've never had this before, and I love it. I love it. But I think I better turn one off. One's enough. Chairman, thank you so much for your comments, and Vice Chairman as well, and for your experience, Vice Chairman on the committee. Exciting to be on this committee. People at times will ask all of us how we got interested in politics, I'm sure in our conversations. And when I get asked, I tell them I got interested when I was very young. I was a teenager. where I grew up is a county called Duval County in South Texas, and had a history of election fraud and, just a bunch of bad stuff. So I've been reading election law since I was 16. Couldn't wait to turn 18 so I could vote. And I worked in my first election as an assistant election clerk at 18 and ran an election at 19, the youngest guy to do it. But I wanted an honest election. That was what was important to me. I'd say how honest an election I wanted. I very much cared about which candidates won. My candidates lost. But I knew that we'd run an honest election. And if you go into my office, you'll see the sheet from that election where I was the election judge and the people that I appointed as assistants that I knew would run an honest election. So I hope that as we move forward, we continue to, as the Vice Chairman mentioned, move us in a direction where I say make it as easy as possible to vote and as hard as possible to cheat. That's how I feel about elections. So thank you, Chairman. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir. Well said. Anybody? Chairman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful for Representative Raymond's comments, realizing that he has been serving in the Texas House since 1876. And he has seen a lot and understands, but I just want to make sure, Mr. Chairman, that the record's straight, that just because he has 2 mics doesn't mean he has 2 votes.
Good man.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you.
you, sir.
So it's an honor to be serving with each and every one of y'all. It's good to be on this committee, so thank you.
Apparently, it's going to be an entertaining committee. Anybody else? No, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, so today we will be discussing general items as it relates to our. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Toth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate what you said, that Texans have confidence that their elections are solid, that they're sound, they're fair, and that they're honest. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. In 2022, tens of thousands of people in Harris County did not get the opportunity to vote because polling places ran out of paper. And if there's anything that will cause the next generation of Texans not to believe in the system, it's the inability to actually go and vote. Thousands of people were asked to wait in line. Hours past the end of the close of polling and voting and just gave up. How many of those people will forever not turn up at the polls again? And we've got to do everything we can to reestablish the credibility of our voting system, not just in Harris County, but across the state of Texas. And I appreciate your leadership in this.
Good word. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So the focus of today's. Oh, well, you gotta give me a signal or something. Ms. Swanson. Ms. Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really looking forward to working with this committee. Was very excited to see who all was assigned to it, and I appreciate all these folks. I see some really familiar faces, and we need that input. We have improved elections in Texas over the years because of your input, and we want to continue to do that, and we want to have honest elections. And we did pass some really good bills that helped, and 2 of them that really helped Harris County last time, and so I appreciate that. And again, we still have trouble. I think I'm the only person on the committee from Harris County, and right? I think so. No, Penny Morales-Shaw. Okay, the only one currently in the room. So you may hear a lot about Harris County, but I assure you that we've done some things that have really helped. We need to do more. But the county is big enough that if there is fraud, it could affect the whole state. So it really is in each person's interest to help us out statewide, but help us out in Harris County. And I just look forward to meeting with you. Thanks so much.
All right, I've been drawn off sides twice. Is there anybody else that would like to? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so today's agenda, we'll be discussing general items as it relates to our committee. We have invited testimony, beginning with the Texas Secretary of State, Texas Department of Public Safety, the Texas Association of Election Administrators, the County and District Clerks Association of Texas, HART, and ES&S. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started. Chair calls Christina Atkins from the Secretary of State's office.
All right. Good morning, members. Good morning, Chair Shaheen, Vice Chair Busey, and members of the House Elections Committee. My name is Christina Adkins, and I am the Director of Elections for the Texas Secretary of State's office. We thank you for inviting us to testify today at this hearing and for giving us the opportunity to talk about the role of the Secretary of State's office, how we play a part in the elections process. The Secretary of State is the chief election official for the state of Texas. As the chief election official, the Secretary of State is charged with providing advice and assistance to election officials, candidates, lawmakers, and members of the public. It is our obligation to work to maintain and obtain uniformity in the administration of election laws across Texas. In addition to providing guidance regarding our election laws, the Secretary of State's office maintains and operates the statewide voter registration and election management system. This is known as the TEAM system. We provide both in-person and web-based training to election officials across the state. We certify electronic voting systems and electronic poll books. Everything that we do at the Secretary of State's office is based on the laws and statutes that our lawmakers have chosen to enact. And these laws serve to keep our elections safe and secure and to prevent voter fraud. I would like to take a moment to highlight two specific areas of law. First and foremost, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about voter registration list maintenance. Texas has a robust voter registration list maintenance program. This means that every day, our local voter registrars are investigating and potentially removing ineligible voters, deceased voters, and voters who have moved both within Texas and outside the state of Texas. We get data from a number of different sources. Most of those sources are from other government agencies. We're always looking for new data sources that will provide us with high-quality data that can be used in accordance with the matching criteria that we have defined in state law and state regulations. I would like to take a moment to highlight specifically the non-citizen list maintenance process because we've received a lot of inquiries on this particular process. What we are currently doing in this area was actually codified as part of Senate Bill 1 in 2021. It requires that the Department of Public Safety, DPS, send to our office information regarding individuals that have had a transaction with DPS and have provided documentation showing that they are not a U.S. citizen. This information is compared to our voter registration database, and for those individuals that were registered to vote prior to that transaction with DPS, they're sending a notice of examination requesting that they confirm their citizenship status. It's important to note that this is done on a weekly basis. That weekly basis is very important because it highlights the accuracy and the freshness of that data when we're performing investigations in this area. We have worked very hard with DPS over the years to ensure that this process and all of the other processes that we engage with DPS on, that these processes are efficient and accurate. Removing ineligible voters is one of the many ways that we preserve the integrity of our voter rolls here in Texas, and what other states do as well. This is something that's unique, or not unique to Texas, but common across the board. Though I will say I believe that the programs that we have in Texas that have been in place for many, many years are some of the strongest ones in the country. It's important to know that the voter registration list is the foundation of a strong election. Having accurate voter rolls ensures that we are protecting our elections from potential challenges, and this is why it is of the utmost importance and something that we place a high value on. I'd like to also go into a little bit more detail on our certification program for voting systems and e-poll books. Our certification program for voting systems has been in place for over 50 years. It started with our office certifying mechanical lever machines. Since then, our technology has evolved, and luckily the legislation or the laws that are out there have evolved with it. In fact, I think the legislature has made a concerted effort over the years to make sure that we have stricter regulations with respect to our voting technology to keep pace with some of those changes in election technology. We require all of our voting system vendors to obtain federal certification before they can even embark on the state certification process. At the state level, there is a thorough document review and an in-person examination by 6 appointed voting system examiners. And these individuals are appointed not just by the Secretary of State's office, but also by the Office of the Attorney General. All of our examiner reports are posted on our website so that the public can review their findings prior to our office issuing any decision on certification. So we definitely highlight and appreciate the transparency that the laws have placed on us with respect to those examiner reports. We find that having those reports out in the public provides folks the opportunity to learn more about how those systems work and to make sure that we have some accountability on the vendors when we make recommendations for changes. We do have a reputation nationwide of having a difficult examination process. It is very thorough, and we are not afraid to deny certification when appropriate. Since 2019, thanks to legislation from Representative Swanson, we have been required to also now certify electronic poll books, commonly referred to as e-poll books. And these are the check-in devices that are used in polling places when voters first begin the voting process. We are now on our third iteration of our e-poll book standards. Our standards define the testing rules and regulations and summarize some of our requirements that exist in state law that pertain to how e-poll books can be used. As we have learned more about this technology and its use in the field, our standards have become more defined and have become much stricter. We've recently released some updated standards, which include some additional testing requirements for all of our e-poll books. And we've also updated these standards to address situations when a poll book vendor is new to Texas or if they've been previously decertified. We hope to continue to grow this program so that we can continue to ensure that our counties are using technology that are complying with our laws in Texas, and we can hold our vendors accountable for the products that they're selling in this state. In Texas, it's important to realize that our system is one of extreme decentralization. All of our elections are run in this decentralized manner, which means that the Secretary of State's office does not administer elections. They are run on a local level by elected or appointed county election and voter registration officials. By law, the elected county clerk is responsible for running elections in each county. The county tax assessor is the county voter registrar. In over 130 counties here in Texas, those two duties have been combined to an appointed office of an elections administrator. Many of our local entities within each county contract with their county election official to run elections on their behalf. However, it is important to note that we still have a large number of entities in this state, schools, cities, water districts, hospital districts, that choose to run elections on their own. And those individual entities are also held to the same standard and must adhere to the laws in the same way that our county election officials have to. This decentralized system means that our local election officials, in accordance with Texas law, make all of the decisions related to the administration of their local elections and what best supports their local community. While the Secretary of State's office is here to provide support and guidance, we are not an enforcement agency and have limited enforcement mechanisms under Texas law. The 2024 election cycle was one of the most pivotal and most scrutinized in history. Election officials across the state worked tirelessly since 2020 to implement new laws, improve security, prevent voter fraud, tighten our election processes, and recruit and train election workers specifically for this 2024 election cycle, as presidential elections tend to be our larger turnout elections across the country. There are many stakeholders that are involved in our election process. In addition to election and voter registration officials, it is very important to note that a successful election would not be possible without the support and participation of the political parties, candidates, and poll watchers. Each of these groups play a vital role in the election process. It's through this coordination and hard work that we're able to ensure that our Texas elections remain secure, accurate, transparent, and accessible. While no election is perfect, and we did have a handful of issues, we did receive a lot of positive feedback about how the 2024 elections were managed and conducted in Texas. I am very proud of my team and of our partners across the state in having a successful election cycle. I will say, though, that the 2024 elections were not without their challenges. Over the course of 2024, our election community dealt with wildfires, flooding, tornadoes, bomb threats, threats to election offices, threats to polling place workers, and even widespread telecommunication outages. All of those things that I just mentioned happened during an election and during a period of active voting. In every single situation that I mentioned, voting continued and the election proceeded. This is a testament to the strength and resilience of the men and women that work on the front lines to ensure that our elections, the cornerstone of our democracy, continue in a safe and secure manner. Going into this 2024 election cycle, we knew that this was going to be a difficult year. The Secretary of State's office stepped up our efforts to identify and work with our support system across the state to ensure that our elections had the necessary support. On behalf of Secretary Nelson, I would like to acknowledge and express gratitude to the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Information Resources, and especially to Chief Nim Kidd and the Texas Division of Emergency Management for the ongoing and top-notch support that they provided to our election infrastructure across the state. They were a phone call away, and in many cases sitting right there beside us as we faced these ever-changing challenges and threats to our election landscape. They were excellent, excellent partners, and we are very appreciative of the work and coordination that they engaged with us on. On a local level, our county election officials proactively engage with their local county leadership, including county judges, county commissioners, local emergency management offices, and local law enforcement, to ensure that that necessary coordination was not just happening across the state, but that was happening on a local level as well. We would also like to thank the Sheriff's Association of Texas for working with our office to help educate local law enforcement on election laws so that our sheriffs would be better equipped to respond to issues that arose to pose safety risks to election workers. These educational efforts and the support and coordination that resulted from these efforts made our election, but most importantly, our election officials and our polling place workers more secure as they were serving in these roles. When the headlines are all about the election results and not about the voting process, we consider that to be a sign of a good election. And we appreciate everyone that helped to make that possible over the course of 2024. We look forward to working with the Texas legislature as we consider legislation that will help us find ways to continue to improve upon the election process in Texas and to continue to support our efforts to prevent voter fraud and to have safe and secure elections. Thank you, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Let the record show Ms. Morales-Shaw is here. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Raymond?
Thanks, Chairman. First of all, we have a wonderful Secretary of State. I love Jane Nelson. She's the best, maybe the best ever. I don't know. That's what they say. But I love her, and I'm very, very happy that the governor asked her to serve in that position. Loved working with her in the legislature, and she's been a great Secretary of State. I want to thank Gabe Valenzuela as well for always responding anytime I've called very efficiently, quickly, and I very much appreciate it. I wanted to ask just a couple of things. One, do you know, as I was listening to you, are there other states out there that you kind of look at as a model, or when it comes to elections and their processes, and or where we could get some ideas to make things better in Texas? We try to do that. Many states learn from us, and we learn from other states. Are there some examples that you think of, or do you know?
I think what I would say to that, sir, is that, our country as a whole has a decentralized election network.
Right.
And every state, runs elections in accordance to their state laws.
Right.
And I do work in close contact with my counterparts in other states. And so, I think we work as a community to try to identify things that everybody's doing well. And when we find something that's working, we try to replicate that as much as we can. I would say Texas is pretty consistent with what a lot of other states do, as far as we have worked very hard to emphasize election security over the last 6 years in particular. And looking at the legislation that's been filed so far this session, one of the things that I'm doing is looking at some of these potential pieces of legislation, and as they move through the process, I look to see how they're implemented in other states. And so it's hard for me to be able to identify a
it
particular
sounds to me like you are.
but we are looking.
Yeah, you're looking, so that's good. It's
Yes,
just
sir.
always good to try to get good ideas from others. I wanted to also ask, I know, and Chairman, I don't know if you saw this, but I know that President Trump, I think yesterday, the day before, very recently, I believe I saw this, called for us, for the states, for the country, to go to paper ballots. Did you see that?
I'm definitely familiar with the sentiment that's out there and some of the
But
recent
did
statements.
you see President Trump call for that?
Yes, I'm familiar with some of the recent statements.
Okay, and so I wanted to ask, if I don't know, you're keeping, I will look with more interest now that I'm on the committee. And I've got a couple of bills that are coming to this committee that I have filed. But have you seen, has anybody filed legislation here in Texas with reference to what President Trump's talking about?
So I think it's important to recognize that our legislature has actually taken steps in this direction a number of years back. Several sessions ago, there was legislation, I think it was in 2021, that eliminated the use of DRE, or direct recording electronic voting devices, to require that everybody have a paper-based voting system. So the full implementation of that across the state will happen by 2026, but I think we have all but maybe 4 counties that have fully converted to paper-based systems.
Okay, yeah, I guess you're right, because when I vote, you know, I still don't really like this, but and a lot of people don't like it, at least been my experience. But you go in, at least in Laredo, you go in and you're doing this, right? You're doing this on a screen like this, but then prints it out, right?
That's correct,
So
yes,
that's
sir.
considered, we voted paper,
And that's because that printed piece of paper is the ballot of record.
right?
So if there's ever a question about the results, if there's a recount, that's what we're going to determine what the count is, or to determine what issues there. If there's an issue, we go to that
So
printed
do you
piece of
know
paper.
when President Trump and others, not just Trump, but it's just, it's fresh in my mind. When he talks, or those who are advocating, when they talk about paper ballots, are they talking about what we have in Laredo, which you vote on the screen, you vote on a computer screen, but then it prints out the ballot? Is that what he and others are talking about? Or I see some of the.
When you hear people talking about paper ballots, I just wanted to make that distinction that we already have in law a requirement for a piece of paper.
Yes, I know, but.
What I think, what you're referring to, sir, is I think there are individuals that would like to see hand-counted paper ballots.
Well, like that's what I grew up with, right? That's what I grew up with. Like, you know, you go, you get a ballot, you go in there and you fill out the ballot and then you turn it in, right?
Or let me add, if I may add something
Yeah.
to that, maybe voter-marked hand-counted ballots or voter-marked pieces of paper, where you're not utilizing a piece of equipment to make those selections and mark it for you, but you have a pre-printed ballot and you're making the selections on
Right,
that
so that's what
ballot
I'm
piece
asking.
itself.
I guess I need to read up more. I mean, I look at, you've got the President of the United States advocating for something. I guess I want to understand, is he advocating for what I think is the traditional paper ballot, which is you go, here's your ballot, you go into your little booth, and you mark the ballot, and then you bring it back? Is that, do you know if that's what he's talking about?
I'd be happy to review the statements a little bit more closely. I don't want to commit to an answer until I look at the words.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
I believe it's more towards that hand-marked, where the voter's making those selections.
Check on that, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir, of course.
And the last thing I want to ask is, it's a little bit of a delicate issue for us, for me anyway, because this is in Webb County. But I've had people come up to me, Chairman, and I'm working on a bill, and haven't decided whether or not to introduce it, but here goes. So we have an elections administrator in Webb County, and I've had my staff check. I think counties that are about 250,000, there are about 17 or 18, I think, elections administrators, right? Like, I think Tarrant County has one, Hidalgo County has one, and, you know, I don't think Travis does, but, you know, Harris, I think, has, right? So in my case, the elections administrator also, and it gets paid around 100,000. I think it's around 100,000 a year by the county. But he also has a law practice, an active law practice. And I'm trying to find out if he's the only one in the state or if there are others that allow that as well. Because I won't say the names, but I've had like judges come to me and say, this guy's running the election where I got to run. But then he comes in front of me practicing, and it makes me uncomfortable. Candidly, I kind of get that, right? I mean, the elections administrator is a very important position. So, do you know? were you familiar with that, by the way, that we have that?
I did not know that particular individual had some outside employment other than being the appointed elections administrator. We have, it's over 130 counties that have that appointed
Right.
situation.
Right.
I think what I can say to that is that there are some prohibitions in Texas law with respect to participation in political activities for our elections administrators, but I'm not aware of anything else beyond that, other
Yeah.
than perhaps maybe county policies that might prevent other types of employment.
I don't think it well, at least the research that we've done so far in my office, he's not prohibited from doing it. And, so I'm contemplating whether you kind of split the deal by saying you can practice in 253 counties, right? But maybe not practice in one, like the one where you're the elections administrator, because you're administering the elections that elect all these judges. So I'm just curious, Gabe or someone could follow up and just let me know. And I'm particularly interested in the big counties because that's where you're going to get someone who's getting paid pretty well, right?
Absolutely.
The smaller counties, I still think we probably should look at that, but I'm guessing that in some smaller counties, they don't get paid very much. So there's a difference. I mean, but to me, if you're getting paid $100,000, that's not bad. So just if you would check on that.
Yes, sir, of course.
Thank you.
Ms. Swanson?
Thank you, Chairman Shaheen. That sounds really good. I'm really excited again that you're chairing this committee. Thank you, Ms. Adkins, and I really appreciate the way you've been very responsive to all the issues ever since you took this top-level job, and we appreciate that. We also appreciate Secretary of State Jane Nelson, and I would agree that she's the best ever, and looks like you do too.
She's got a gift.
You're probably not supposed to make a comment. So a question right off the bat here. What is your definition of personal knowledge as it pertains to canceling or challenging a voter registration? Because there have been conflicts where people did know that somebody was dead or had moved, their next door neighbor is dead. They know that. But sometimes the information that's collected, we've had elections officials that were like, oh, no, it has to be family. And so they refuse to take that information from others. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
So personal knowledge with respect to this particular item you're talking about has to do with voter registration challenges. It's not defined in Texas law. And that has created some challenging situations. Our office did issue an opinion on this several years back, and I apologize, I don't have that opinion on me, or I would, I think, read to you what we wrote there. I can get you a copy of that.
Okay.
But I do agree that this has been an area where there have been some challenges because it's not defined in the law, and I think some counties and county attorneys may take a different view on what personal knowledge constitutes.
Could you get one or of us just suggestions on what you think would help? It sounds like we need to fix something in the law.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to provide you with some information, some of the research we've done before in this area
Great.
as well. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Mr. Toth?
Thank you, Chairman. How long have you been on with the Secretary of State's office?
I have been in this current role for 2 years, but have worked for the Secretary of State's office. It'll be 13 years in June.
Oh, wow, okay, so you've been there a while.
Yes, sir, I have.
Can you give us an idea of the history of what you guys have done as it pertains systems-wise for clearing the voter rolls of ineligible voters that have moved out of state or passed or whatever?
Absolutely. So in Texas, we're actually very fortunate because most of our processes and the required data sets that we get are defined in Texas law. And so I'll use deceased voters as an example. For deceased individuals, we get data from a number of different sources. We work with Bureau of Vital Statistics. We get information from the probate courts, from the clerks of the court, the local registrars of death. All of this information is submitted in many times to the Secretary of State's office, but also to the local county voter registrar. There are some limited cases where we can perform the cancellation for deceased voters, but most of that information passes through us to the local voter registrar because they're the ones that are responsible for performing those cancellations.
It's not the responsibility of the Secretary of State's office then to make sure that a local voter registrar is accurate?
Well, I would say it is now to a certain extent. There was some legislation from this past session in 2023, Senate Bill, I believe it was 1113, was the bill number that gave us the ability to monitor compliance for list maintenance, and it gave us some limited enforcement mechanisms. And I would say what I have seen is since that law was enacted, we have seen much greater participation and much greater follow-through from our counties on acting on the data that we have sent to them.
How often did you have to step in and say these names needed to have been removed and they weren't removed?
I would say that we start working with the counties very early on. As soon as we obtain that authority, we develop some internal process and procedure and some reports that we could utilize to help us act in that way. And we started working with the counties immediately. So when we start checking on them and we let them know that we're watching this stuff and start asking questions about data sets that are there, what we have found is that they start acting very quickly. I can't think of a situation where it got to that point where we had to there has not been a situation where we've had to withhold funds yet. And so if it's data that I can see, and I will make a distinction, those of our counties that utilize our state system directly, our team system, without using a separate third-party vendor, I can see every action they take. I can see the letters that they mail out. I can see when they print those letters to mail out. So I know that they're acting on the data that we send them. For our offline county our offline counties, they use separate vendors to help them with voter registration. I can't see what they're doing throughout the process. I can just see final results. But I can look at data that's been sent to them, and I can see if it's resulted in cancellations, if it's resulted potentially in somebody being put what we call on the suspense list, if it's related to residency issues. And so we look at those different data points to see if they're acting on that data. We have had some counties that have needed some nudging, and I think have needed to know that we're paying attention to this. But by and large, once they've realized that we were paying attention and monitoring, many counties stepped up their efforts in that area.
Thank you. We pulled out of Eric last session.
Yes, sir.
What role did Eric play in the past as far as helping y'all?
So, I just want to emphasize that we already had a robust list maintenance program in Texas.
So nothing, huh?
Well, I would say Eric provided us some additional data sets that we have been able to replicate from other data sources. And I will tell you that there's information that I can get, for example, from DPS that we were not getting before that provides some of the same things that Eric was providing to us. And there are other sources like that we're looking at. And I feel very confident in getting that data from other government sources and other jurisdictions and entities, because we are working on getting some state-to-state data sharing agreements. What I would say is I worry about putting too much on a third-party vendor, and I prefer getting the data directly from those data sources. I think that our office has found that when we're going directly to the data source, we can ensure the quality of that data. We can ensure the security of how that data is transmitted, because we're usually talking about data that has personally identifiable information. And that's a more direct route than going through a third party that aggregates that data.
I guess what I'm after is I want to know what we've done to tighten the system up. My daughter moved out of state years ago, and for years after, she was still in the voter rolls here in Texas. No one ever removed her. And it wasn't until I publicly stated 2 years ago that mysteriously her name was removed.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm asking is, what are we doing to tighten it up to make sure that we're actually on top of this?
That's a great question. We are always looking for new data sources. And I think that right now we are doing a good job with...
But I mean, clearly she had been removed from having a driver's license in the state of Texas for the better part of 6 years, and she still wasn't removed.
Well, and I think that's one of those data points that we are now going to start working with DPS on, that we have brought into our data enlist maintenance process. I would say there's one piece there, though, that I think has proved to be continuously challenging, and that's dealing with historical data, where somebody may have moved years ago before some of these newer processes are in place. It's sometimes harder to find those individuals, either because it happened in the past before we started working with a new data set, or their voter registration file doesn't have all the complete data that we need in it. We find with voters that are much older, that registered to vote before they had to use a driver's license number or social security number, we don't always find them with the data matching, because we can't get that high quality match if they don't have that in their record. Now, there's not many voters in that situation, proportionally speaking to our list, but that's the piece that I think is a little bit challenging, is the historical part, where we have since added, I think, some really great data sets and great processes to catch that going forward, but it's about the historical pieces that are in there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Pisha?
Thank you so much for being here and for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have also some questions on Eric, but I do want to ask a question about Representative Raymond and what he was saying about hand counting ballots. Could you tell me just the estimated cost of what that would be to hand count ballots in our counties?
I do not have a number available to me at this time. There may be some data points that we can provide to you that might help give you a representative
it just sounds
sample.
really expensive.
I will tell you that we have been concerned in the past with respect to the primary in particular, where the state funds and pays for the primary election. We did some calculations for the previous primary that if every county in Texas opted to hand count, we would not have had enough money to pay for primary costs across the state. And that was primarily related to labor costs, individual,
And we're already having a hard time getting people to want to work elections, right?
many of our counties do have challenges in making sure they have enough workers.
Yeah, I was born in the 80s, so I don't remember that system. We've always, had a more technologically advanced system. So I was just asking how much it would cost to do and implement those types of.
I'm happy to look at some of the numbers that we had when we were considering the potential of this affecting our primary funding, and we can get with your office if that's all right after the
Thanks.
hearing
I
to
would
provide
like
some of that
to know
data.
that.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to move into some line of questioning around Eric. I remember us voting to leave Eric. Can you tell me a little bit about why the state of Texas left Eric?
Of course, there was some legislation that enacted some requirements with respect to our cross-check program, which is what it's referred to in the election code, interstate cross-check, that indicated that we were not able to take on certain activities or perform certain activities that were not already required or authorized under law. And in participating in ERIC, they had some membership requirements, one of which was that we send out some mailers to unregistered households. That was not authorized under Texas law. So that because we could not comply with that part of the membership agreement, we had to withdraw from ERIC.
So the part that made us have to withdraw is that we did not want to or couldn't send voter registration information to non-registered eligible Texas voters?
What was stated when this bill was being addressed during the last session is that there are costs that are incurred by the state when we send out mailers, postage costs, printing costs.
Trust me, I run one of the most competitive elections out of the 150 members on the House floor. I know a little bit about the cost of mailers and stuff like that. So it was strictly on the concern of how much it would cost to send a teeny little postcard to eligible voters all across the state of Texas who should be registered to vote and engaging in their
Well,
civic
what I would
duties.
say is that the legislation, that particular piece of our agreement is what prevented us from participating in ERIC and required that we withdraw from ERIC.
And
I
how
think-
much did that cost?
I don't have those numbers, but we can get that to you.
Okay. And so since we've left Eric now, I've heard our amazing Secretary of State mention that we are going to create our own cross-check system. Where is the state of Texas at currently in developing that system?
So this is coming at the same time that we have been redeveloping our current voter registration and election management system. And we are about to roll out the updated version of the
I'm
team
super
system.
excited to see this. I've been waiting for 2 years now.
We're very excited about it as well. We've put a lot of work into making sure that this system is fully compliant with Texas law, but also safe and secure, particularly when it comes to transmitting data between the state and the counties. And so what we have done with this system is we have built some of the data matching capabilities and the data transfer capabilities, which is something that, again, from a security perspective, we had very grave concerns over, making sure that this data was transmitted appropriately. We have built that into the system, and then what we are doing is we are looking again at some of these other jurisdictions and other government entities that have the data sets that Eric was using and obtaining it directly from those sources. So instead of going through a third party.
Okay, hold on. So wait, let me get this straight because now you've confused me. So we're using the same systems that Eric was using.
Well, what I would say is Eric was getting the data, they were aggregating it and doing their data work and then providing it back to us.
Okay.
We're not going through a third party, we're getting it directly from the data sources now.
That Eric was getting them from.
Yes.
Okay. And how much does the system cost that we've created? How much did the development on this system cost us?
Ooh, those development costs, that's another one where I'm so sorry, I don't have the
You're
details
gonna have
there.
to give my office a lot of numbers.
We will come and bring your office a lot of numbers. What I will say to that, though, is where we may see some costs related to ERIC has to do with more like subscriptions to some of these things and building some of these changes into our system. And we do have funding from the legislature on that.
How
But as
much?
far as how much money we,
What are you getting funding from the legislature?
so it previously was a rider in our budget, but it has now been rolled into the base budget, and it's 1.5 million.
1.5 million. And how much did it cost to be a part of ERIC?
So ERIC had annual membership fees, and the annual membership fees, and I don't want to say something that that I'm not 100% sure about, but I will get you that
I
information.
think it was about $100,000
It was
our
it was a
annual.
little bit more than that, but I can't remember the exact number. But I would say on top of that, most of the expenses had to do with that mailer.
The mailer.
The postage
No, I
and the
know. I
printing.
know those mailers are really, really expensive. So let's just kind of unpack this because we've ran multiple elections now without having a cross-check system. And we don't want things like what's happening with Representative Toth's daughter to continue happening. We don't want someone who has moved out of our state and might be now registered in California or New Mexico to be registered in 2 states and essentially be able to vote in 2 states, right? And that might not be catched. So how are we cross-checking with other states now since we don't have ERIC? Are we just calling Secretary of States up and being like, tell us about your voter rolls, or how are we
No,
doing this?
and respectfully, ma'am, I would say we haven't been without a cross-check program. We have been getting data. Prior to ERIC, we received data from other states, and that process has continued. We have been receiving, our voter registration list maintenance program, our data sources have been, that's defined in state law and has been that way for, I think, 20 to 30 years. None of that ended. ERIC gave us a few additional data sets that were helpful, but we have been able to replicate those data sets and find that data from other sources. And so nothing was paused. Our list maintenance still happens every day. We continue to get data from states on a day-to-day basis. We're just now, for some of the other data sets that we got from ERIC that we found to be helpful, we've identified other sources of that data and are building that now into our routine and standard list maintenance program that we've been operating.
Okay, so as we move forward, what measures can be taken to improve kind of that communication between us and other states? Because once again, Representative Toth, you bring up a really good point, and I know a lot of my constituents have also mentioned the same issue, right? And so how can we improve this communication to make sure that things like that aren't happening? To make sure deceased individuals are coming off our rolls. We know that sometimes those individuals aren't caught. So what can our state do to improve those conversations?
I think that the best thing that we can do, and it's something that we're actively looking at every day, is to try to identify new data sets that we hadn't had access to before, to try to find ways to engage in MOUs or subscriptions to some of these new data sets that are out there. Again, we have done we're doing a pretty good job with deceased voters as it exists today and on a day-to-day basis. What I worry about sometimes, again, are those historical situations where we may have found some great data sets and we can begin utilizing that process. That may not catch those individuals that have moved prior to or before. And so I think looking at maybe what can be done to review some of that historical data.
So I guess I'm trying to be specific. So I guess what I'm saying is, how do we identify those new data sets? Because ERIC, right, was a much larger system, and they had already identified all those data sets. So I guess what I'm asking you is, how are we going about to identify those missing pieces? Because you're saying
Sure.
we're going to find them, and I guess what I'm asking is how?
Well, we've already found every data set that ERIC had. We've already been able to replicate that. There was only one piece that we couldn't get directly from another governmental entity or some other like a subscription or something to that effect, and that was voter participation.
Okay.
Individuals that voted in each state.
Right.
But since that time, we have engaged with many states right now. We are in the process of finalizing data sharing agreements. So rather than
Can you name some of those states for me?
We have one signed agreement right now, and we have many in process. I would have to talk to our general counsel about what I can say about those ones that are not signed at this time. But I'll say that we are targeting all of our surrounding states and then other states for which we have a strong Texas pipeline, where we have individuals that move between those two states. I think we're very close to me being able to give you a full list. But again, because of some of the confidentiality rules, not just in Texas, but in other states, I need to double check with what I can say from a contract perspective. I'm not trying to
No,
prevent
it's
that
okay.
information
And then
from
I
coming
just
out.
have kind of like one final question, and that's around y'all's communication with DPS, because I know that that's a really big portion of how we're maintaining our voter rolls. So I guess what steps can be taken between your relationship and DPS's relationship to enhance some of this data sharing?
So DPS is one of our strongest partners in this area.
Absolutely.
And we work with them on a day-to-day basis. We receive data from them every day. They have been working very closely with our office with the development of our new system to make sure that we are getting as much data as we can that would help us with respect to voter registration. I'm trying to think that if I've seen any legislation or any particular points that I think where legislation or data sets would help us, but DPS has been extremely forthcoming with us in providing us whatever they have. In anticipation of some other pieces of legislation that might be coming down the pipeline, we've talked to them about what they retain and have with respect to things like citizenship data. We already have a strong list maintenance process there, but we've definitely worked with them to figure out what we can identify on the front end that might be helpful. So we're already working with them on identifying folks that have surrendered their driver's licenses or have moved. That's already in work. We've been in the works with them on that as well. We have not had problems, I think, in obtaining or getting their participation, so I can't think of a specific data set or category, but I'd be happy to visit with their folks and continue those
Yeah,
conversations.
I would love to meet
and visit with
offline
your
and
office,
get
of
some of
course.
those numbers about how much it's cost us to create a whole new system from scratch as opposed to the one that we had, and kind of some of the other questions I
course.
had. Thank you so
Yes,
much
ma'am.
for your time. Thank you,
course.
Chairman.
Mr. Raymond?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, come in a little bit on what Representative Plessa said, and I know she said, I guess her experience has not been with paper ballots. I want to be clear about how I feel about it. You don't have to comment, but members, I think I said at the beginning, make it as easy as possible to vote and as hard as possible to cheat. And if my view is, I really don't care what it costs, because this is too important. And if we as a legislature get to a consensus that we need to change to where we have more traditional paper ballots, because that's safer, it may take longer to count. I don't care if it takes longer to count, if that's a safer way to get a legitimate sort of outcome. And where, I think that if somebody who's 80 years old or somebody who's 28 years old goes to vote, and we pass laws that says you're going to vote with a paper ballot, I doubt the 28-year-old is going to mind very much. If they're going to vote, they want to vote. So, I'm not going to vote because now it's paper ballot. I'm not going to do it. I don't think that's the way it's going to work. But if we get there because we think that's the safest way to get to the right outcome, that is the right outcome being an honest outcome, members, I don't care what it costs. I just want to say that.
Ms. Swanson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had one little follow-up question from what I asked you before. So for a voter to make a challenge on a residence, could you just give me your best definition of what personal knowledge is? I realize you feel like we need to clarify it more, but if we had to do something today, somebody's holding an election or they're making a challenge, just what do you think is the definition?
I think that we would need to include in the definition something that talks about or identifies the evidence that's presented with respect to that challenge. And I can give you an example if that might help illustrate it.
Okay.
We see organizations that do pretty substantial amount of work on identifying commercial post office boxes or commercial addresses.
Right.
And I'll use the post office box, for example. I heard of a situation where an individual looked and identified, 30 plus individuals that had the same address. They walked into a commercial post office or, a commercial store that has post office boxes. and literally stood there and matched up the address to the box. They could see the numbers where they were aligning. So they submitted a challenge because we have a process under Texas law. It's a specific confirmation notice, not just the broad one, but one specifically for this purpose, where an individual has what we refer to as an impossible address. They took pictures of the post office boxes. They took pictures of the surrounding area and neighborhood to indicate that this was not a residence in any way that they could identify, and submitted a challenge. So they had pretty substantial research that they had done to identify that this was not compliant with the law. And there was a county that rejected this challenge, saying that you don't have personal knowledge, you don't know these voters. Ultimately, it's the county's decision because they are the ones that have to act on that. In that scenario, they presented some pretty substantial evidence to me that indicated they had validated those addresses, and I think I would have been more inclined to act on that should I have been in that situation, because it's not about knowing that individual voter. That's
Right.
not necessarily what personal knowledge means. It doesn't mean a
Yes.
personal relationship with that voter. Another example I have is a situation where an individual had people that previously lived at their house still registered there, and they were receiving voter registration cards. And they submitted a challenge saying, these individuals don't reside here. And the question was, well, do you know them? And the response was, well, no, I don't know them. And the challenge was rejected. Now, there are many counties, I will say, there are many counties that appropriately act, I think, and do their research and do their own investigation on top of what is just presented to them before they take action in that area. And so I think personal knowledge doesn't have to be about knowing that voter. There are other circumstances and other evidence you can provide that would demonstrate personal knowledge of the issue that's being challenged.
That's very helpful. So it sounds like we need to pass something that lists some of these things, that you're going to get us a list, and that mandates that they have to accept that.
I think any area where we can add clarity
Yes.
would help our voter registrars, because I think many of them, they have to rely on their legal counsel, their county attorneys, and I think a little bit more guidance in that area where it's less fuzzy and a little bit more clear and direct would be helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Chair Wilson?
Thank you. Ma'am, thank you for being here today, and you guys do a great job. Just a couple of questions, not to stir anything up, but just to demonstrate my ignorance in the questions I ask here. As it pertains to, for example, were there any paper ballots this last electional cycle? The
So-
traditional, the ones
Voter
that were...
marked, hand-tallied paper ballots.
Yes, yes.
So in the Republican primary in 2024, there were several counties, Gillespie County that conducted the entire Republican primary with voter-marked, hand-tallied ballots. Travis County, the Republican Party counted their mail ballots through a hand tally, and those were obviously voter-marked because they were mail ballots, and those were hand-counted. I do believe there are other small jurisdictions, cities, water districts, hospital districts, that may also use that mechanism, but they don't report that data to our office. I don't have insight into how they conduct those things locally, so I'm sure there are other examples. I just may not be aware of them.
Okay, great, thank you. And as it pertains to the Gillespie County on the primary, how did that go?
Well, I think that would probably a question that would be better answered by maybe those party officials or some individuals from Gillespie. I personally wasn't present. We did have individuals that were there in Gillespie County, and I think there have been different accounts of whether people found that to be successful or whether it was something that they wanted to repeat. And I think that would probably be a better question as far as establishing the success of that election to direct to those folks.
I
that can speak.
appreciate that, but as the State Department, y'all were monitoring what was transpiring across the state of Texas.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what did you observe? What did the State Department observe, or the Secretary of State's office observe in Gillespie County?
Yes, sir. I think that what I would say to that, I would say a few things. One, Gillespie County and Travis County both worked with our office to make sure that the tallying method that they were using was compliant with state law. And they actually utilized some different form of tallying sheets that found to be very successful. And we did work with them to make sure that they were fully compliant with Texas law. And I do acknowledge and appreciate that. The one thing, and this is something that I've warned about before, is that hand counting does take more time.
Right.
And so it was definitely a situation where it takes more time. That is well known, and I think that that's what I would say we observed with Gillespie in particular, is that it was a lengthier process, and so results were a lot later in getting into the county.
How much later?
If I recall, the last we heard things that were starting to wrap up about 4 a.m.
Okay. And were these sequential ballots or?
We have a ballot numbering requirement in Texas, yes, sir. So these printed ballots would have had a ballot number on there that have some kind of, there's a numbering mechanism. What the law says is that ballots have to be numbered consecutively, beginning from number 1. These were your standard issue voter marked paper ballots, so that requirement applies to them, yes, sir.
And just for my knowledge, and I'm clearly, I don't know the answer to these questions. How was it? Was it just marked by a pen? Did they have to fill in a bubble? Was there a Chad?
For marking the ballot, sir? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, yeah.
Typically, what our Texas law requires is that you have a box or an oval, a shape, whatever your shape is on your ballot. The law was actually broadened out, so it doesn't just have to be a box, it could be an oval. And a person is given what we refer to as an indelible marking instrument. That's what the law says. So they're provided that indelible instrument, and they are physically marking their selection on the ballot. I will add, and our counties, have been compliant in this area, is that we do have federal and state requirements for what we refer to as accessible voting devices in polling locations. So individuals with certain disabilities can vote a ballot privately. And my understanding is that both counties, well, with Travis, it was mail ballots, but Gillespie County was compliant in this area, that they did have that equipment available.
I see. And so they completed the tally by 4 a.m. the next day. Is that what you're saying?
It varied depending on the polling location.
Okay.
Turnout at a particular location will determine how long it takes to count.
Was this like where they did it by precinct or
Yes,
at
sir.
each precinct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In a traditional hand count situation, it's required to be by precinct, by voter registration precinct. So the individuals at that precinct, the judges and clerks that work there, they were responsible for performing the tally of those votes at that precinct. After they tally up those ballots, they then complete what's called the precinct returns, that are the official returns for that location. And that information, all of that, the counting, the ballots, the paperwork, is all sealed and secured and delivered back to the custodian of election records for retention. And then at that point, they can aggregate those numbers to find results countywide.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier that it's getting harder to find people who want to work in elections. Why?
Yes, sir. I would say, I will acknowledge that we have some, I believe, some county clerks and elections administrators that can
I know,
speak to
but
some of their
I know
specific
y'all
challenges.
are looking into this.
Yes,
and
sir,
I
of
will.
course.
I ask them the same
I just always want
question.
to make sure that
Yeah.
they're given that opportunity to address some of those
Abs-
issues that are
yes,
personal.
ma'am.
But I
That's
will
fair.
say what's been reported to our office is, elections are a big time commitment.
Yeah.
And so it does take a lot of time. One of the things that I'm most concerned about is decorum, I would say, in a polling place. We had a number of reports in this past election with problems in polling locations where voters and other individuals that were authorized to be there sometimes created challenges for those workers. I will tell you of a specific situation in one county where there was some information about what you could and could not do in a polling location was being communicated out to the public and was not correct. It was about taking pictures in a polling place. And the voters were coming in demanding to take photos of their ballots and of themselves casting their ballots. And the workers were doing their best to educate and inform these individuals that this is not permitted in a polling place. And I think because of just the temperature in that area and the concerns and passions of voters, it started to become a difficult situation for those workers. They were There were reports to our office that these individuals had people throw things at them, threaten them. They were walking out to their car and people were throwing water and water bottles at them. And in this particular situation, many of the workers walked off the job because they could not handle that and that stress in that situation. You know, that's one example. There are other examples where things like this have happened, and I think our polling place workers, you know, these are individuals that don't do this work full time. They're volunteering their time, and we need to be very mindful of doing what we can to protect those volunteers.
Well, I appreciate it. I always tell folks, you know, you hear things about, you know, all the problems and whether elections are stolen, X, Y, and Z, and so forth. And in my opinion, whether cheating has been determined or not, if people don't have confidence in their election, then we have an election problem, period.
Yes, sir.
And so, you know, and I know the Secretary of State's focus in that direction, building confidence and all those sorts of things. Can you tell me about any programs or anything that we're doing to get to communicate with our citizens so that they can more and more can gain confidence, considering all the disinformation campaign plans that are out there? You don't know what's true and what's not. There's a lot of fear, and then they find instances where there are those issues here and there. So what is it that we can do, or have y'all looked to do to build confidence?
So what I would say is that the best response to misinformation and to combat incorrect information is with correct information. And I think our office works very hard to make sure that we are putting out accurate and up-to-date information about our election process and procedure. In the past, you know, we're very mindful, I think the Secretary is, with making sure that she's identifying important timeframes during the election process. So she very routinely issues news releases to make sure that we have accurate and correct and up-to-date information coming from official government sources. I think making sure that we're communicating that effectively on our website, which needs a little bit of updating our website, just from a modernization standpoint. But we want to make sure that's an easy area where a lot of people get information about elections, making sure that information is up to date and accurate, and that the website itself is easy to utilize so that people can get that information. And what we focus on in that area is always making sure that we are redirecting to official government sources. We encourage our counties and our local entities to make sure that they have that accurate and up-to-date information on their website, and if they utilize social media, to always direct back to those official sources, so that information we can be assured is getting to the public is correct.
I appreciate that. One of the items that have been out there is a concern associated with system breaches in person voter privacy and ballot secrecy.
Yes, sir.
And I think there's some ongoing things, and again, I'm not read in on anything in that regard, other than that the fact that it was demonstrated that you can run the piece and you can basically determine however it is, but has your office looked into those concerns as it relates to ballot secrecy?
Yes, sir. I think it's important to note every voter has the right to a secret ballot. I mean, there's a constitutional protection for a right to a secret ballot, and I think preserving a voter's privacy and their right to privacy is of the utmost importance. We became aware of a situation right after the primary election where some individuals were using various data points, publicly available data, this is what we were able to confirm. Through publicly available data, in certain circumstances, you might be able to identify an individual's ballot. So we immediately worked with the Attorney General's office on this to try to find resolution. We worked with many counties on this, surveying them, talking to them about the data that they have in an election, how that data is maintained and presented to the public. And we did issue some emergency guidance with respect to this issue. Again, this was in conjunction with many discussions with the Attorney General's office on what protections we had under current law to protect our voters' right to privacy. And there are, or I will say the Attorney General prior to this had issued an opinion, I believe it's KP 0463 is the opinion, that indicates that when we're looking at election records, and you're looking at precinct election records, that if there is personally identifiable information in those records that allow you to identify a person's ballot, that information may be redacted under current Texas law. So we identified this opinion and provided a list of potential data points that counties should be looking at if this is a concern, and that they may need to look at pursuant to public information requests, or in how they are publicly presenting that data outside of the request process. In order to be able to make those redactions, you have to seek an opinion from the Attorney General's office or an open records decision. And I will say the Attorney General's office, what has been reported to me by counties is they move very swiftly. They have been moving very swiftly in this area and have been very responsive to make sure that folks have the legal coverage and the correct permissions in place to perform these redactions. What I would say to that, though, sir, is that that has been a short-term solution to, I think, potentially a bigger issue. And I think, again, everybody worked very hard understanding that we were, in our 2024 election year, and there's not much that can be done to address that in that moment other than relying on what our laws already tell us we can do. But there are some things that, bigger policy issues and some potential discussions that have been happening, I think, that would address some of these issues, I think, in the long term. We had a short-term solution in place, but it's important to look at this not just in the context of this year and this election, but in all of our elections going forward.
The redacting piece. So we passed House Bill 5180 last session,
Yes, sir.
and I greatly appreciate y'all's proactive work on that bill. And essentially, members, that was the accessibility to the stored ballots after the 60-day mark. We basically had to get to common knowledge of when those records would be available. And so at 2-year mark, they can destroy the ballots, from what I understand,
Yes, sir.
correct? And so there was a lot of different interpretation, and we were able to provide some clarification so that accessibility to those ballots. So the redacting on those ballots, was it through the AG's office that was determined what needed to be redacted?
So we sat down with them.
Yes.
We met together in person and sat down and talked about this, and we discussed potential data points that even their folks at that office had identified appeared to create problems when you put all of these different things together. So we provided the list in the advisory, the emergency guidance that we issued, and that Secretary Nelson, wanted us to issue very quickly because this is a very big deal. But that was done in consultation with attorneys
Right.
from the Attorney General's office to try to identify some of those data points. I will say there are two data points that have proven to be, I think, what most folks have been looking at. Location. The location at which a person votes seems to be one of those data points that
Or redacted? It's been
yes,
redacted.
that has been redacted. And then we have a situation sometimes in Texas where we may only have a few voters in a precinct vote. We have situations where you may be the only voter in your precinct that requests a mail ballot.
That's fair.
And so I think identifying those situations, those situations might need some additional redactions to protect that voter privacy.
I see.
But again, before a county can do any of this under current law, they have to seek a ruling from the Attorney General's office. And that's important to note because that's how we make sure that people aren't just over-redacting and that there are parameters in place, that it's done in accordance with Texas laws.
Okay. Thank you. I
Yes, sir,
appreciate
of course.
Vice Chair Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Adkins, thank you for all you do. You've been such a resource to all of us in our offices year after year. And Secretary Nelson and her time that she gives to all of us to talk about these issues is very helpful. I'm going to want to change direction, but to just cap off the Gillespie County and the paper ballot primary, do you know how many ballots they were counting? How many people voted in that?
I don't recall the number off the top
I'll
of my
cheat
head.
for you. I think it was 8,000.
That sounds right, yes, sir.
And that took, from my understanding, 24 hours of counting if you add up the time across the different precincts, and it took 200 people to get that done.
From what I recall, that sounds about right, sir. Yes, sir.
And in Texas, at the presidential election, we had 11.4 million votes cast, roughly.
Yes, sir.
So this was 8,000 200 people to count, 24 hours of time.
Yes, sir.
And usually paper counting results in more inaccurate totals. That's not necessarily a question. I thought your point of what happened in Gillespie was well taken. And that was a very small number, and it was an incredible task. And I think if we try to do something on a statewide scale, we would have major problems. I want to talk about online voter registration.
Yes, sir.
We know that it's an efficient way of doing things. Are people in Texas utilizing online voter registration right now? Can you talk about that? I know we have a lot of new members to the committee about what happens with online voter registration in Texas and who's utilizing it.
So what we have in Texas, and this was, well, first, I think there's two different components to this. One, transactions through the Department of Public Safety, DPS. If somebody has an existing driver's license through DPS, they are able to make certain types of updates online. And those individuals that have made updates through the DPS process, they are able to also update their registration at that time. In addition to that, it was part of Senate Bill 1 in 2021. The language was broadened out to allow individuals that are currently registered in Texas, but may have moved, not just within the county, but outside of their county, they can update their registration online. So these are not new registrations, but they are updates to existing registration. Again, they could do that through DPS, but now there's a specific portal through Texas Online where they can make those updates and update their registration.
That's through y'all, correct?
Yes, Texas Online is actually hosted by DIR, and so, but we get that data from them. Yes, sir.
And so these different portals that can be used, how many Texans have done this? And I know we're going to hear from DPS in a little bit, but do you know the number of Texans that have updated or changed their registration online?
I do have that data point. It's in a piece of paper over there.
Okay. It's millions.
It
right?
is, yes, sir.
Millions of
Yes, sir.
Texans
It
have done
is.
this. Okay. So who can't do it right now?
Who's unable to utilize these online options? New registrations.
Okay.
If it's a
So-
new registration, you would not be able to utilize, for example, Texas Online.
Are we having any issues with the online portals that we're using for people updating their systems?
Not that I'm aware of.
So it's working pretty well to what you've known. You haven't had any red flags?
We have
right
not
there?
had any systemic complaints or notifications of problems, no, sir.
So millions of Texans are doing it. We've been doing it for how many years? When did we start this program?
The expansion to allow updates from across county, that began in 2021. Prior to that, it was limited to just updates within your own county if you moved across town.
Okay, so millions have done it, but new registration can do it. So someone that just turned 18, someone that just moved to Texas, or just had never registered to vote, they're the ones that are being kept out of this process right now?
Those individuals would not be able to use that online mechanism.
Okay, have you looked at other states that do it? Because I've got data that shows that other states that have gone to online voter registration entirely are saving money through the process because of how we do it now, where you fill out, maybe you're at a music festival, you fill out an online voter registration form. Not an online, you fill out a paper voter registration form, hand that over to a registrar, they take that back to a county, or maybe it's a mail-in, but usually it's going back to the county. And somebody has to try to read your handwriting from that music festival, fill in that data, type all that in, and then hope they don't make a mistake, and then submit it. That's a lot of moving parts to get us registered to vote. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct? So we've seen in other states where more people have moved to online voter registration, they save money because you've got less people power and time to do this process. Would you expect the same thing here if we had more of these people doing it through that avenue?
It's possible, and that's something we can always look at if there's some additional data that you're looking for from our office. I'm happy to try to track down some of those data points, but I would say, sir, I think it's important that any discussions about any online activity, we need to make sure that we're emphasizing security, that this is done securely.
Absolutely. And the systems that we have right now are secure, are they not? Are they working effectively? You haven't seen any issues with
We have not had any reported issues on their security, and they do require authentication by an individual, to authenticate their identity.
Tell me
before
more
they're able-
about that.
So what I mean by authentication, for example, DPS, if you are updating your driver's license through DPS and you need to update your registration there, you have to authenticate yourself as being that voter that has that driver's license. That's done by pulling data points off that driver's license, including what I believe they refer to as their audit number. But I'm sure my counterparts at TPS can speak a little bit more to that. And then with respect to Texas Online as well, there are some additional data points like that that they have to be able to put into the system to be able to utilize it.
Let me ask also, when I fill out a paper form, I can make a mistake or whatever. I might tape it, or the person transcribing that can make a mistake. Talk to me about how the online portal can help prevent some of those mistakes.
So the online portal, for example, Texas Online, that is data entry that's done by the voter. For example, if you are needing to update a driver's license or social security number, or if you had, or let me back up. If you're updating your address and whatnot, it's retrieving the record that exists, and you are authenticating certain data points on there. And so if there's not a match between those data points, it would prevent certain types of updates that may not be authorized.
Do you ever get voter registration forms where people forgot to put in data points, so they just missed spots, or
Yes,
it's not
sir.
there? What happens in that case?
So that individual would be mailed what's called a notice of incomplete.
Okay.
So we'd hold that registration date for them. And that's very relevant when we're up to a voter registration deadline. They would receive a notice and have the ability to fill out a new form to provide that missing information.
Now, if we're using the online portal, all the fields can be required, right? So that you're not missing a data point that way before it would
It
be
is
submitted.
definitely possible to program it that way. Yes, sir.
So that we could, in theory, through online, you've got the person registering themselves. They're verifying who they are under, a verification system you have. They're making sure they hit all the data points. We've had millions of people do it, and we don't have any real reported problems. Was that your understanding?
Yes, sir. I can't speak to any reported or systemic issues with our current system.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think if we've had this millions of Texans doing it, I hope we will explore this session how we can find those loopholes for the few that haven't been able to do it. Because it seems to me that if you're doing this yourself and you're verifying yourself as opposed to a middle person having to put in the data, that is going to lead to the most accurate data possible. And also, is it quicker when someone does their online and we want to make sure we have updated roles? Is it a quicker system than through the mail process?
Well, when that person is authenticating and entering their information, there are validations that we have to make. We have to put it what we call through the live check process, where we're validating that this is a real individual. I would say for those individuals that are utilizing those systems, that validation is happening at that time, at the time that they are completing that online transaction. With a paper application form, when the voter registrar gets that form and they enter it into the system, that's when they perform that it's an instant validation.
Okay.
Or near instant.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure we're having up-to-date lists and it's happening quickly to address some of the other concerns we've heard about. And through the online portal, we can do that.
Through that online portal, you would get a validation. For example, if we're talking about a DPS update or somebody that's utilizing Texas Online, that check, what we call the live check process, is happening at the time of that transaction.
Well, thank you so much. And the only other final note, and I think we had a lot of discussion on ERIC already, and I'm glad to know we're finding those data points. I think if we want to have the most accurate roles, we need a cross-state check, and we're doing it. But it is surprising to hear that we may be spending 10 times more or so on the cost now. Or if you get us that number, I think that'd be very helpful for us because
On
if it,
current costs, sir? Yes.
yeah, just if we used to be able to do it for a little over 100,000, I know we don't have an exact number, but somewhere in the 100 to 200 range, and now we're budgeting, you said 1.5 million or so for it?
Well, that was the amount that was budgeted. That was the cost of ERIC. I mean, those.
Okay.
It's not just the membership fee. It was all of the other costs associated with it, with those postage and mailing requirements. That was all wrapped up into that amount. So what's being allocated to us now is what was being allocated to us under our agreement while we were part of ERIC. It's
Okay.
the same. It's the same amount.
Well, I think it would just be very helpful, and maybe we can get our chairman Capriglione and Doge committee to check, but we just want to make sure we're doing this as efficient as possible. And so if ERIC was more efficient, then it'd be good to know. And if we're doing it now, hands-on, and it's still just as efficient, great. But I also think we want to look at how we're saving taxpayer dollars. So
We are happy to
thank you
get
for
you
that
that
feedback.
information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Toth?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just for some legislative clarity
Yes,
on
sir.
the reason why we kicked Eric to the curb is because it didn't work. It was crap. Excuse me, can I say that? I don't know if I can't say that. I redact that. it wasn't just the state of Texas, it was all over the United States. People were having problems with Eric. It wasn't working. And as Mr. Raymond said, I don't care what it costs, if no one believes in our voting systems and there's no integrity in it, then we ought not do it. The amount of testimony that we had last session and the session before last on the efficacy, the trueness of Eric was just, it was overwhelming. That's why we got rid of it. It wasn't because we were trying to save any money. It wasn't because we weren't complying with everything with this through the Secretary of State's office. It didn't work. So thank you for getting rid of it. SB 545, which was Coal Course, HB 5259 became law last session, which is my bill. And it required DISH's Department of State Health Services to report to you. There was an MOU that you guys signed with each other that they would report death certificates
Yes, sir.
to you. How has that worked?
It's been working well. We were already getting some information that allowed us to formalize and update our agreements, and we have not had any issues with that process.
So
we've been
you're
getting good
not
data.
hearing from the counties, you're hearing from DISH's directly, right?
Yes, we get data sources from larger organizations, and we get them from county sources as
Are we
well.
finding any disparity between what DISH's is telling us than we're finding that what's being reported back to us from the counties?
No, sir. What I would say to that is we get data, particularly when we're talking about deceased voters, we get sometimes that data 4 or 5 times on the same voter.
Right.
So we're getting a lot of reinforcement that a particular individual may be deceased.
Okay, one last question. We have a 12-day early voting setup now, 3-day break, which for those of us that work the parking lot, kind of welcome. And then an election day. What about the idea of just doing 13 days of voting? So that we've got now just a 13-day voting period, not an election day, but 13-day voting period.
Single voting period.
Right, and the vote, the count, and the report all happens from the precinct.
There are a lot of states that do that already.
Why don't we do it?
That is a policy decision for the legislature, sir.
What are your thoughts on it?
I think that there are a lot of moving pieces with that, the single voting period. And I think, our office has talked to a number of members of the legislature about this particular point. So there are some policy decisions that would have to be made with respect to that kind of transition. It's a big change. But we are happy to answer questions on that and help identify those areas if that's the decision that our state needs to go.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Morales-Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Atkins.
Yes, ma'am.
This just goes to the validating the voter roll names. We all know that Real ID is kicking in. I think we've been getting notices that it's like May 1st or something like that. Is the Secretary of State taking advantage of that whole validation system to update the voter rolls?
Yes, ma'am. I would say we have been for a number of years now. The DPS non-citizen list maintenance data that we get from them, the reason why we get it and the reason why it is a high-quality data match, which means it's very actionable, is because of Real ID compliance requirements. That is why we have that confidence in that data that DPS is gathering. They have done a very good job in making sure that their documentation with respect to Real ID and what they retain in their system is very up to date when those transactions happen. So we have been utilizing that for a number of years on the list maintenance side.
Okay, good. And about what percentage would you say that resolves as far as validating the voter roll names? If by May 1st we expect that everybody will have transitioned to Real ID?
So it's all about the life cycle of your driver's license and the life cycle of when you last went to DPS. So, and I use the non-citizen list maintenance process as the best example. So just to illustrate this idea, we started that process, as codified, through the legislative process in 2021. So anybody that has gone to DPS to update or have a transaction on a driver's license since 2021, between 2021 and now 2025, those individuals will have been, we have validated through the Real ID process and we have received that data on that individual. So in a few years, once we have completed that life cycle of a driver's license, then we can feel very confident that the individuals that have had those transactions that maybe have been previously registered, that they will, at some point have had the opportunity to go make that presentation and make those validations through DPS. So it's a cycle because of, not everybody goes to DPS every year. They don't have a need to. But as they go in, we get that updated, fresh data.
Got it. Yeah, they don't go in at the same time, but my understanding is that this year, by May 1st, is the deadline.
And I will say DPS has done a very good job making sure that we are kept up to date kind of in their efforts in that area. And again, we are timely getting that data for them.
And based on the information that you have about how many voters or what percentage come in and use their driver's license, what is the percentage that will resolve as far as validating voter roll names? Do like a ballpark? Is it 50%? Is it 80%? Because I would think most people come in and use their driver's license when they come to vote.
That's an
even
excellent
though there's
question.
other
That is not a
IDs.
data point that I believe is retained anywhere. I don't think there's anything that tracks what type of ID a person uses when they appear to vote. But I can tell you anecdotally, from what has been reported to me by my counties and my state inspectors that are out in the field, it's a pretty substantial number of voters that use those DPS-issued driver's licenses and personal ID cards. So that's the majority of our voters.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Lisa?
Question. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask you real quick, what is our relationship like with the state of Alabama?
Our relationship with the state of Alabama.
Our relationship with like the Secretary of State of Alabama.
So I work a lot with my counterparts in other states. They're election directors, the folks that, on my level, perform election-related duties. And so, we have periodically worked with them from time to time. I know them from participation in different working groups and conferences. And so we have a pretty good relationship with almost all states with respect to kind of the nuts and bolts of elections.
And
at that level.
Alabama tends to be a red state or a blue state.
I think if you're looking at how a state
Votes.
their votes using, for example, the last presidential election, I think you would likely classify Alabama as a red state.
And Alabama has left Eric, or are they currently still in Eric?
No, I believe they've left Eric.
Yeah, so Alabama was actually the second state to leave Eric. And when they did, I just want to read you a quote. Their Secretary of State said that Eric is one of the greatest tools for election integrity, transparency, and accountability. He has also challenged states that withdraw from Eric to demonstrate that their state has a mechanism in place that accomplishes the goals of Eric. And so I say all that because I have some concerns that we might not have a mechanism currently in place that did the job that Eric did. And so as we move into this next state of elections, I think they start in about 100 days, right? I want to make sure that we are working together to make sure that we have a robust cross-check system to make sure that the deceased peoples come off our rolls, that people don't live in two states and technically could vote in two states, which we've seen is technically happening. And so I don't want to have any misinformation or conspiracy theories put out there. If we're going to do this right, I think that we should follow the golden standard that was set by Eric. And I think this was a bipartisan coalition of states that decided to use Eric, and it's a bipartisan coalition of states that agreed that that was the golden standard. Thank you.
Members, are there any other questions? Ms. Atkins, you've been great on the hot seat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Rebecca Hibbs from the Texas Department of Safety.
Good afternoon. I'd actually planned to say good morning, but obviously it's gone longer than that. Chairman, members, my name is Rebecca Hibbs. I'm with the Texas Department of Public Safety Driver License Division. I am also our NVR coordinator for the agency. Before I do my testimony, though, I would like to compliment the Secretary of State and Christina for the compliments they've given to us. It is true, we absolutely do work together. We are considered one of the best partners with them because they are one of the best partners with us. So the collaboration has been fantastic over the years. So today what I'd like to do is talk to you about how the Driver License Division offers multiple opportunities for a customer to complete a voter registration application. And I'll also provide an overview of those different opportunities as well as specific information related to our online application process, which I think is of interest today. The driver license system allows a voter registration application only if a person can meet two specific basic criteria. The first is that they must be a U.S. citizen, and the second is that they must be at least 17 years and 10 months old at the time of the transaction. These requirements are actually programmed into our system, and they can't be bypassed by an employee. So if you don't meet those requirements, you don't get presented with the voter questions. It's also important to note that we consider that information to be valid only at the time of the transaction, because obviously your citizenship status and your age can change each time we come in and see you. Age particularly, yes. Yeah, my thought is the minute you walk out, your age has already changed, right? Voter registration applications are sent daily to the Secretary of State's office, and they include all of the varieties that we offer right now, which is in person at a driver license office, online, by telephone, and we also offer it for mail-in address changes. Right now, the mail renewal applications still actually go out with the motor voter card, which requires the person to complete it and mail that back to their local registrar. But we do have plans to actually work to remove that card and start placing those questions on the mail-in renewal form. Once that's done, then basically every single transaction that we'll do will have voter registration questions, and they'll be electronically sent to the Secretary of State's office. Of interest, so in fiscal year 24, we completed over 3 million voter registration applications. So how did that break out by method? A little over 1,600,000 were done in a driver license office, 1,350,000 were done online, and the other 20,000 we had left were done between telephone and mail-in address changes. So obviously what that shows you is we're doing just as many online voter registration applications as we're doing in a driver license office. So what does that process look like then for the customers when they go online? The Texas.gov, which is exactly what Christina mentioned, is the one that hosts both our online and our telephone options for people to either renew or replace their license. When they log in, they put in their information, and there is some basic security information they do have to enter. That information is their driver license number, their date of birth, the last four of their social security number, and what we do call the audit number, which is a secure number on each driver license that's produced, and it changes every time they get a card. Once that information has been verified and that person is authenticated, the driver license system is then checked to see what type of transaction they can do and if they're eligible for the voter registration application. Those eligibility requirements are the same online as they are in the office, right? So if you're not a U.S. citizen and you're not at least 17 years old and 10 months, then you won't even be presented with the voter registration questions. The system will bypass that portion entirely. If you are eligible, it will present the question, would you like to register to vote? If the person selects yes, then it gives them the option to indicate if it's a new, a replacement, or a change, just like on the voter card. And it also asks them if they want to serve as an election judge. All of those answers are exactly the same as what we provide in the driver license office. So from a customer perspective, what they do when they walk in with us and what they do online is exactly the same. There's no difference between them. Once that person makes their voter registration selection and they complete their transaction, their selection is printed on their receipt at the end of the transaction. So whether they select yes or no, it's on there. Same as what we provide in the office. So if you select voter registration, we print that on your receipt in the office as well. All of those voter registration applications are sent to us from the Texas.gov application every night. We process them in our driver license system, and then the following night we mail those out, we send those out to the Secretary of State's office in the same voter registration file that we send to them for all of the in-person, the mail, all of that's the same. So that's the information I have about our system and our processes, but obviously I'm open for questions, which I suspect you have.
Members, any questions? Ms. Swanson?
Yes, just wanted you to address, like, is there still proof of citizenship requirement for an individual registering to vote while also getting their Texas driver's license through DPS?
Yes. So the way citizenship works for us is once you have presented proof of citizenship, we do not ask that question again. You're marked as yes as a citizen in the system, and we know that that's your status and that won't change. For individuals who are lawfully present, that means that they're either a permanent resident or they're a visitor here. If they wish to obtain a Texas driver license or identification card, they do have to present their proof of lawful presence every time that they come in. For individuals that are permanent residents, also refugees, asylees, and parolees, they receive a license that looks the same as a citizen's license, so there's no indication on there that they are lawfully present. If you are what's considered a visitor, you receive a limited term license. So that's marked to show that that person is here for only a short period of time, and the expiration date on that license is also attached to whatever expiration date we get for their lawful presence documents. So those individuals obviously come in, usually either within every year or every 2 years, depending on what we receive back as their expiration date from SAVE. And SAVE is the application that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security provides verification to us for. So yes, those individuals who have to come in, if they are lawfully present, and let's say they've received a certificate of naturalization, we will ask them to bring that in because we still also have to verify that certificate of naturalization through the exact same process that we do the lawful presence documents. Once they are certified as naturalized, we mark them as a citizen, yes, and we never ask for that document again.
Could you repeat again the people that you said get a license just like everyone else's? And I think it was it felons? Just list those again. I didn't quite
Yes.
catch all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So permanent residents, what most people usually call the green card, right? So that means you're a permanent resident here. We also have refugees, asylees, and parolees that under the federal requirements, those individuals are not considered visitors. So they may not have a permanent status yet, but they are considered to be treated like a permanent resident.
So their driver's license looks like a citizen's. So what then is the protection that we're not? Can you address that? How do we keep from treating those people as citizens for purposes of voting?
Yes, so I think part of what Christina was talking about and some of the things that we already do, she talked about the fact that they get a weekly file from us for all the individuals who are lawfully present. That does include people that are permanent residents and part of the other categories. One of the other things that we are already working with them on, and we started last year, and it'll be implemented when they implement their new team system here this summer, is the fact that we will be providing them 2 additional fields in a daily file where we already provide them things like name changes, address changes, if your DL or ID number change. That'll be citizenship, so it'll be yes or no. So we're going to tell them right off the top, is this record that we're sending to you, is that person a citizen, yes or no? The other thing that we're also going to be providing them, which she talked about, is if that person's licensed in another state or jurisdiction. So what that process looks like for us is, for decades now, we have always received notification from another state when that person surrendered our Texas license, so we could mark our record to show that that individual is no longer licensed in Texas. It doesn't change the fact that they could still potentially have the card, but it invalidates it in our system. So everybody who checks knows we don't consider that person licensed here anymore. We receive that information, and we'll be actually putting that in the file to where we will tell them this individual has now been marked as licensed in another state, and they're no longer a Texas citizen, not a citizen, but a Texas resident. And then when they come back to us, we do have people who move back and forth from state to state. When they come back, we remove that status. So what we'll be providing in the file is the fact that that status has been removed, and then their new Texas address in there. So I think what we'll be doing with those 2 things is probably touching on some of the stuff that y'all asked about related to ERIC, right? Some of the additional items that were not originally part of what our file was that we sent to them, but we will be adding it. And I think the citizenship field will be one of those things that will also help them as well.
So what about all the people who you sent the information before you had these columns about citizenship and before they got their new system? What are we going to do to correct any problems we might have?
Yeah, so I think what she was talking about too from the historical perspective, right, those individuals who weren't there beforehand, one of the things that we've talked about with them is the ability for us to provide and I'm going to use a very technical term, a superset, right? Basically, it's a file where we would go in and pull that field for all of the records out of our system, and we would basically provide them a large dump of information that says, here's all of the records that we have, here's what their status is right now, and then when you actually start receiving those files from us on a regular basis, it's a daily file. Every day you'll receive updates to that. And basically what that would do is it would allow them to be able to see the historical information that's there without waiting for that person to come back into the driver license office.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Busey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your report. You answered a lot of my questions ahead of time. Did you tell us, did you give us a number for total number of people that have utilized the DPS portal for online voter registration since fall 2020 when we're
Yes.
required to implement it?
So for online, you're right. So we started in September of 2020. And from what I can gather on here, and I am not that good with math, so you're just going to let me count here, but it looks like each year we have done between 1.1 and 1.4 million voter transactions online.
So like
So
almost 6
for
million
like
people now?
probably like 5-6 million that we've done in that time period.
In a previous session, DPS came and they said that the portal's working without complication. Is that still the case?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
You're not seeing any security issues with utilizing the online portal?
No. As a matter of fact, one of the things that's happened is that we work closely with DIR to ensure that we prevent fraud that's occurring through our online transactions. And they have done a lot of I think they implemented it last May. They did a lot of additional security requirements related to it. So besides the authentication portion that I talked about at the beginning, those 4 pieces, they have their new Texas by Texas account, basically, right, where you can go in and you can create your own account and you can actually put in all of the different applications you might want to use, DPS, DMV, Texas Parks and Wildlife, TDLR. You can put it all in a single account, and they even do additional verifications on there so that when those individuals go in and create that account, we absolutely know that person is secure, and they can't go in and change that information and like potentially, use it for fraudulent purposes.
So 5 to 6 million Texans have used the DPS portal to register to vote online,
Yes, sir,
and it's without complication.
absolutely.
Would there be any major challenges to taking the current portal and expanding it for the people that are not currently eligible to use it if we were to act legislatively? Financial costs or major costs or?
I think it depends on how y'all write the bill. So a lot of the bills that we've seen right now related to the electronic voter registration are really, from the way we do the review of it, it looks like it would impact the Secretary of State more to create like their own online application. If you wrote the bill, and we could obviously talk to your office about this if we needed to, if you wrote the bill in such a way that you would still log in using your Texas DLR ID, you could still authenticate, but there would be a separate process for just voting only instead of going through the regular transactions. That is an option. Currently, if you want to just change your emergency contacts that we have, you don't have to go in and renew or replace your license. We allow you to do that free of charge through the exact same application that you do the renewal and replacement.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all the work you're doing to help modernize and keep our elections safe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Members, any other questions? Yes, please, yeah.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I have a couple of questions for you. This is around Eric.
Okay.
So from my last conversation with the witness before you, it seems like your department is taking on a lot of responsibilities in helping ensure our voter roll is clean. Would that be the case?
I don't know if I could even say it that way. I'm not really familiar with, all of the different information that they receive. I can tell you the information that we provide to them in our daily file. We've been providing since 2010 when we
Okay,
implemented
can you
our
tell
new
me some of
driver
those things?
Yes. So basically, and let me pull this because I have a list of.
I guess what I'm asking is, what additional information are you providing
Okay.
since our removal from Eric?
So really, the only things that we provide different are the 2 new fields that I just talked about before, the citizenship field and licensed in another state. Everything else that we've been providing to them, we've either been providing for probably well over a decade, or the citizenship files at least since, I believe we started that in 2021. So for several years now, those have been in place. So really the only two things, and we did work with the Secretary of State's office to determine what other type of information we gather that they might be able to use, but they were already receiving that from all of the other resources. So truly, it's just those two additional fields.
Awesome. Okay, so then I guess I'm just trying to understand this all a little bit better. So how are you coordinating with other states to make sure that all the data is accurate, since that's one of your new kind of like tasks?
Yes, so if you're talking about the licensed in another state or jurisdiction, okay. It used to be that that was always a mail process, and we would print paper, and they would print paper, and we would mail it back and
Oh,
forth,
no.
and you manually update that, right? In 2023, in September of 2023, we started participating in what's called the state-to-state program. That is a requirement of the Real ID Act, and so all of the states are required to do that. And basically, what this application does is it's a warehouse, basically, where we actually move one driver from one state to the next. So we may keep their record here, but let's say you move to Louisiana. Louisiana is also participating in state-to-state. When you move there, there's what's called a pointer on the record, right? You're probably not really interested, but basically what it means is we move that person by their pointer. So you're in Texas, we move your pointer to Louisiana. We now know everybody who participates in state-to-state knows that person now resides in Louisiana because that's where they're at. You move to Oklahoma, you move the pointer there, we now know that. As a part of that electronic exchange, we now receive electronic notification that that person's been licensed in the other state because they have to pull that pointer. When they pull the pointer, we've automated our system to go in and say, mark that record as licensed in another state. So it is real time for those states that are always doing it in real time, which they should be, unless the system happens to be down. But otherwise, we receive it the minute the person gets issued in the other state. So for us, it's seamless.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so is there an extra cost to being a participant of state to state?
It's a federal program, so yes, ma'am, there is a cost associated with it.
okay.
But that's something that we've been working with to ensure was within our budget. So there is a cost. If you want to know what those costs are, I can obtain those for you.
Yeah, will
I don't
you
know that off
share
the top
that
of my
with
head.
me? I would like to know what that extra cost is. And I also wanted to know, was there an extra cost that your department had to take on now that you're doing all this extra work, coordinating with different states and providing more information to our Secretary of State's office? So I guess, is it costing y'all more money?
So the cost for doing like the file changes to send to them, that's all in-house, right? We do all of our own development. The department actually has our own programmers. So there really is no cost. We consider this as part of our daily operations. The cost for participating in state to state, yes, there is a cost associated with that, but we had to do that as part of the Real ID Act, which would have been, which was something we were doing even before we had conversations with the Secretary of State's office. So that cost is really more part of ours for the issuance process to make sure that we stay in compliance with the Real ID Act than really what we're doing for Secretary of State. They just basically receive a benefit by us having that information.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers.
Absolutely.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Hibbs, you've been great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good day.
The chair calls Jennifer Doinoff from the Texas Association of Elections Administrators, which going forward will be referred to as the Texas Association of County Elected Officials. Thank you, ma'am, for being here.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Shaheen and Vice Chair Busey, and members of the Election Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning to testify for you. My name is Jennifer Doinoff. I am the Hays County Election Administrator, and I wanted to start off with just a little bit of statistical data for Hays County, because you're going to hear from a colleague in a minute that's in a very different county, and she's going to give you some information about her county, and I just want you to be able to put that in perspective. So Hays County, your neighboring county here in Travis County, has 183,000 registered voters. We have 14 early voting locations and 44 election day vote centers. Excuse me, I'm suffering from allergies today. I also serve as the legislative chair for the Texas Association of County Election Officials, as you just said. In 2024, Hays County had 68% turnout for the presidential election, and of that, 56% turned out in early voting. So we had a pretty high early voting. Across Texas, election officials held strong and secure elections with minimal issues. The Texas system does continue to be a model for the rest of the U.S. on how to run elections with high integrity. I attribute this success to the partnership with stakeholders around the state, including the Secretary of State's office, Texas Department of Emergency Management, the AG's office, Texas Association of Counties, and other groups, local citizens in our counties, and law enforcement, and of course, the state legislature. My colleagues and I offer ourselves as subject matter experts to you on the actual implementation and running of elections here in Texas. We're excited to work with each of you to establish positive policy changes that enhance the election process and improve voter confidence. To briefly touch on just a handful of our priorities, which I think we've met with some of your offices on, and I know we've sent letters out. First, our association has been working with legislators to clean up Senate Bill 924, which I understand is being heard right now as we speak over on the Senate side, that was passed in the 88th legislative session. While we understand the intentions of the original bill, the unintended consequences of adding polling location and finding additional workers were more than some counties could accommodate in this past election. Finding both workers and locations has become increasingly difficult. There's 3 bills currently to address this, and so we look forward to working with you on this. Second, our association believes in a countywide polling place program offers benefits to Texas voters in many ways. The program is efficient, accurate, and is auditable. Currently, 99 counties participate in the program, and just about 85% of the voters in the state vote in a countywide polling place county on election day. County election officials are supportive of the countywide polling place program, particularly in how it benefits the emergency management and also disabled voters. I look forward to working with this committee to strengthen the program as we collaborate to improve our elections' accuracy, integrity, and confidence. In 2024, we began to see concerns over ballot privacy. It was rumored that countywide polling place program negatively impacts ballot privacy, which is not the case. Ballot privacy is something that our association and membership takes very seriously. It's an issue in all counties, regardless of whether or not they're countywide polling place or precinct-based. This problem presents itself due to situations where there are small election precincts, few people in a certain precinct voting either by mail or in person, in early voting or election day, or overall low voter turnout. County election officials have worked closely with the Secretary of State on and voting equipment providers to improve redaction standards. And as you heard before from the Secretary of State, this remedy is not 100% effective and is not sustainable to make sure that we provide these protections. We look forward to working with this committee to protect every Texas voter's right to a secret ballot. Legislators have made many positive reforms to pre- and post-election auditing, like the reconciliation forms that we saw come out of the 2021 session. Before every election, counties perform public systems tests of election equipment to check its accuracy. And additionally, all Texas elections are audited through the partial manual count after each election. So these are some of the steps that we take before and after the election to ensure that systems are acting as they should and tabulating as they should. In addition to that, in 2026, Texas counties will be required to hold a second audit called the risk limiting audit after each election. Several Texas counties have participated in a pilot program, RLA, with the Secretary of State and look forward to having this additional layer of security and accountability. We would love to partner with any legislators interested in continuing to improve the overall audit process for Texas elections. County election officials have come a long way since 2020. Although Texas has a long-standing history of strong election laws and policy, we always strive to do better, and we know we can do better. Another priority we've identified that will help this process is a change in the law to allow voters currently registered in Texas to transfer during the 30 days of the election to another county and take that that voter registration with them. And we'll talk in a minute about how some of the things you just heard about would be, this would help in those situations. Our members feel that this would improve accuracy and security of our elections by eliminating the need to vote limited ballots and lessening the number of voters that vote provisionally. This would make elections easier for the public to audit, providing more apples-to-apples reporting, and make reconciliation and ensuring voters that vote on ballots with races that they are eligible to vote for their current address. These are voters that are already in the TEAM system and already have been verified and live checked through the TEAM system. And then finally, confidentiality for election officials. And that is our poll workers as well. It's very crucial in this day and time. Finding good trained workers to replace the ones that are leaving is becoming difficult. Workers in Hays County have been visited in their homes and have been questioned by people who misrepresent themselves. And lately, threats against election workers have increased. You heard some things earlier about some things that have happened to our election workers in the polls. And we look forward to working with you to protect our election workers. Thank you, and I am ready for questions.
Thank you, Mary, very much. Members, are there any questions? Vice Chair Busey.
Mr. Chairman, can you just talk a little bit about how countywide polling has benefited either your association, if you want to speak as a whole, or your county, your experience?
Sure. So I think it benefits in a lot of ways. One being what we just talked about, emergency management. It gives us the ability, if on election day there is one of the things that Christina talked about earlier, fire, outage, flood, that we can move those locations or be able to send voters to a different location, which would be difficult to do in a precinct situation because we don't have that many locations in a single precinct. So it's good for that. It's good for persons with disabilities in that they can select polling locations that are more conducive to their own needs. And I say that because I know that a lot of disabled voters in Hays County like to go to a particular location because it has an awning and they can pull up and vote, and there's no sun and there's no rain, and it's just a lot easier. So it gives them that also. I think there's a fiscal impact to doing it. I think it's.
That was my next question. Can you anticipate if we were to ban countywide polling, would you think there'd be an increase in costs or access and any other things you can anticipate if we were to have to go back?
There would be, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fiscal note that we put on the Senate Bill 924. It would just be twice as much that. And I think it came to, I want to say, around $2 million. We left some spreadsheets with some of y'all's offices on this, but that is.
Is that just in your county?
Oh, no, that's
just across,
statewide,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
And that is, and I could be off on that. I did not bring that spreadsheet up here. But it would be more equipment. It would be likely rental for polling locations because we don't have the polling locations out there. And it's becoming harder and harder to find schools and churches, private buildings that want to do the voting. And so we've seen an increase in rent, polling place rent, and I know larger counties have as well. So,
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your work.
thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair calls Samuel Durheimer from Hart InterCivic. turn. She'll pass it out. You can go ahead. Thank you,
Oh,
sir.
you ready for me? Great. Chairman Shaheen, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today about some of the key issues in election administration and election system security that you're going to be addressing this session. Again, my name is Sam Dierheimer. I'm the Director of Government Affairs from Hart InterCivic. Hart is one of the leading voting system manufacturers based right here in Austin, where we've been located since our inception over 100 years ago. Hart began as a family-owned paper printing company, but over the last 25 years, we've grown to become one of the top 3 voting system providers in the country with customers across 20 states. But our home has always been right here in Texas. The election systems we provide are designed and manufactured in Austin, just a short 20-minute drive away from where we sit today. Through my position at Hart, I've also spent the last 5 years serving on the executive committee of the Election Infrastructure Sector Coordinating Council. It's kind of a long way to say the SCC, which is a council of election technology experts that advises the Department of Homeland Security on issues of election administration and security. And my stint there included 2 terms as chair of that council. I'm also the current chair of the American Council on Election Technology, a trade association of the leading election system and service providers in the United States. Through these roles, I regularly engage with election officials, other election companies, and some of the top cybersecurity experts from across the country. My attention is focused pretty narrowly on keeping voting systems and election processes secure, and so my comments to you today are going to come from that specific perspective. Now, my company, Hart InterCivic, is one of 2 election system manufacturers, along with the SNS, who you'll also hear from, approved and certified for use in the state of Texas by the Texas Secretary of State. At Hart, we design and build the equipment on which votes are captured and counted. So we provide the voting devices on which voters cast their ballots, as well as the tabulation systems on which election officials count those ballots. We do not provide any other election technologies. We don't do voter registration, e-poll books, or election night reporting, any of the other functions of elections. In total, we supply the voting systems to 201 jurisdictions across Texas, including many that are represented by the districts of the members of this committee. That's 113 counties, plus some cities and smaller districts. To protect the integrity of every vote cast on a Hart device, we apply a layered defense in depth approach to security that addresses the shifting gamut of potential attacks and vulnerabilities in both the technology and the human-controlled processes of voting. By implementing multiple layers of security controls of different kinds, we maximize defenses and reduce gaps between those defenses. By applying this defense in depth approach to each aspect of election preparedness, that's people, processes, procedures, and technology, we're able to build a strong security framework with multiple independent and redundant layers of protection and readiness. Now, importantly, no Hart device is capable of connecting to the internet. Now, this does not mean that Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or any other signal, any other form of signal, is merely disconnected in our devices. It means the devices are literally incapable of creating those connections because the software and hardware necessary to make the connections are not present in our products. While other election-related devices are connected to the internet by their nature, such as e-poll books or election night reporting systems, the voting machines that you use at your polling station and the election management and tabulation systems used by local election officials to count those ballots are not connected. They are intentionally air-gapped from any device that is capable of connecting to the internet. And though the responsibility for the physical storage and conservation of election equipment rests with the local election offices once delivered, at Hart we know our role in safeguarding those devices continues. Hart routinely provides services and education to our customers to improve security practices even after the final delivery of our products. Further, we maintain regular communication with our customers across the state through monthly webinars, through newsletters, through user groups, and in-person meetings where we discuss the key issues impacting election administration with our customers. For Hart, the sale of an election system isn't the conclusion of a deal, it's the opening of a long relationship built hopefully on trust and support. We know the better informed and educated we keep our customers, the smoother and more secure their elections are going to be. So that close relationship we maintain with our customers is going to be key as we move forward this year and into 2026 and beyond. The federal government has signaled a pretty significant shift away from direct engagement in election infrastructure. So the local election officials are kind of unlikely to continue to receive that breadth of election security tools, best practices, cyber resilience reviews, and disaster preparedness exercises previously provided by DHS and the EISAC that were provided through the designation of elections as American critical infrastructure. It will be left to the counties and to the state to fill any gaps in coverage and keep election officials apprised of the latest best practices in cyber and physical security. So when our local election officials or the Secretary of State come to you for support and funding to cover cybersecurity trainings, poll worker recruitment and trainings, and new modern voting technology, know that they are no longer receiving assistance on these essential services and technologies from other sources. The more we can do to keep Texas election officials ahead of the curve on security, the more secure our elections are going to be. Finally, I'd like to conclude my brief remarks today with a focus on a specific area of election administration in which I think you're likely to see several bills this session, and that's pre- and post-election testing and audits. Every election, Texas clerks and election administrators perform a series of tests on their voting devices both before and after each election, such as acceptance testing, logic and accuracy testing, hash validation testing, and post-election audits to ensure that the process was fair and accurate. These public tests have become increasingly important to maintain the public's sense of integrity in their election systems. We kind of used to say that an election official's job was to accurately count the votes and determine the winner of an election. But over the past decade, we now know it is equally important to give election officials access to the data and to the tools they need to verify that determination to the voting public. Robust audits are one of the best tools an election official has to prove the validity of the elections they oversee. I encourage every member of the committee to personally attend these pre-election tests and post-election audits in your home counties and encourage the members of the public to join you. These events offer a transparent view into the mechanics and operations of your local election systems. This session, several bills are expected to come before you that will strengthen, streamline, and standardize some of the audits performed across the state. And I encourage you to give these common sense and nonpartisan policies the attention they deserve. As an election system manufacturer, Hart strongly supports better auditing. And to be clear, that's auditing of the very systems my company provides, because we know it will help our customers run accurate and, importantly, verifiable elections that will engage the public's trust. Texas has a long and proud history of conducting the most transparent elections in the nation. This session, you're going to have the opportunity to maintain Texas's position as an innovative leader in election policy and security. So I thank you for allowing me a brief opening comments here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Chair Busey.
Yes, can you just quickly, you use term air gap, will you just walk us through what that means and why it's important and how it protects our ballots?
So it means that the election systems, the voting devices you cast your ballot, as well as the tabulation systems that the election officials use to count ballots are completely disconnected from the internet and disconnected from any other system that might be connected to the internet. So there's that air gap that they are not connected to anything that is connected to the internet. So if you're going to engage on those devices, you have to be physically present in front of them.
So there's no way for someone to use the internet to come in and hack these systems?
There is no way.
No way whatsoever?
They do not have the
Because I hear a lot of people come in this committee and tell me that's happening all the time across the state.
They might be confused with some of the other devices that are used in an election, because some other, as I said, like e-poll books by their very nature are connected to the internet.
Sure.
But the tabulation system is disconnected from the e-poll books and disconnected from any other system that could connect.
So there's no way to hack it digitally?
There is no way to hack in digitally.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Toth?
Sorry about that. If you could you explain what the tabulators do?
Yeah, very simply, they count the ballots.
Okay.
So the ballots are taken in at the polling sites where you generally are going to put them into a scanner and get an early unofficial result. But those ballots are transported to a central counting location, and that is where the official count of the election occurs.
How long has it been that your tabulators have had zero connection to the internet?
As long as I've been at the company, and quite a bit longer than that.
How long is that?
I've been at the company for 6 years, but I can tell you that even long before I got there, that was also the case. We have never offered any kind of
So
remote.
three of the largest voting manufacturing companies, Electronic Systems Software and Dominion Voting Systems and Hart InterCivics, have acknowledged that they all put modems in their tabulators and scanners.
No, sir, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. We have
Well,
never put a modem
so
in our tabulators.
This isn't true then from NBC News?
That is not
They
true.
are,
Not- I
they
can
are
only-
conservative hacks, I know they are, but this is January 10th, 2020.
Yes, sir.
That's not true?
I can only speak for my own company, but we have never put a modem
So you
in
never
anywhere.
said that to NBC News?
I certainly did not, sir.
Okay, just, all right,
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Representative Swanson?
Thank you, Chairman. We appreciate you being here.
Of course.
And I love being back on here, my 5th term on here. Several things. I do want to verify that we have followed over the years when your machines did get certified in Texas and Dominion's did not. They failed twice. And so we pulled the paperwork and found out that, among other things that failed Dominion, was that their machines could be connected to the internet. And apparently they came in and said, well, the elections officials can build a wall of protection like any of them would know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to do that. So I do feel like we've always gotten the same feedback that yours and ES&S cannot be connected to the internet other than, like you say, e-poll books, things like that. Another thing I do commend you on is that on Hart InterCivic machines, you've never, there's not an ability to count a ballot twice. It's impossible, correct?
That is correct.
Right, okay. Can you tell us about, have your machines ever been hacked in, I know they can't be over the internet, but have they been hacked in person? And also, when you do these logic and accuracy tests and you come back and you check them afterwards, are you coming up with, in some counties, where somebody has messed with them? Because, I mean, obviously you guys can't be watching every single machine you've ever sold. So I'm interested to know what you're finding when counties are doing their logic and accuracy test afterwards.
Yeah, so I'll start with you asked a couple questions in there. I'm going to try to get to all of them. I can only speak to my own company. We have never offered any kind of remote access into our devices. I can't speak for other companies, but I can tell you that that has never been a feature in a Hart voting system. I am unaware of any in-person hack that has ever occurred. We put great effort and great thought into the physical security as well as the cyber security of these devices. Again, we apply a defense in depth approach so that if any given layer of security fails, there are multiple additional layers. And so we have not only do we do internal testing, we do external testing on these. In fact, myself and my partner from ES&S also attended. We've done events where we've gone to white hat hackers or ethical researchers and given them devices and given them access for days to say, see what you can get. They could not get into the devices. And they were they were soldering things onto these devices. They were taking them apart. They were hooking up electronics that I can't explain to you to try to gain access into the operating system of the devices, and they could not get it in 2 days of unfettered and open access where they were allowed to use any tools that they could. You can kind of imagine in a real setting, in an election office or in a poll site, if someone is breaking out a soldering tool, poll workers are going to notice that. That's not going to, if they're breaking out hair dryers to get past the tamper-evident seals, if they're injecting serums in to try to get past the layers of security, it's simply not feasible that that's going to be done without being noticeable. I wouldn't say, any electronic device, given enough time and effort, could potentially be hacked. But we build layer upon layer of security to prevent the opportunity that that could ever happen.
Okay, and what about your logic and accuracy tests county by county? How are those turning out?
Well, for ours, pretty well, I think. I have heard that there are some difficulties, and I know that I believe there's going to be a bill that's coming before you to kind of standardize some of the procedures around performing the logic and accuracy test. I think that would be very good for the state and would not only make sure that each county itself is performing a solid and verifiable logic and accuracy test, but making sure that it's standard across the entire state. So that's something I strongly urge you to give attention to this session.
Okay, that sounds good, but you haven't had times when a county's come back and said, oh my goodness, something's wrong with this machine. It's been giving, for every voter, it's giving 5 votes to this candidate and half a vote to that other one. Like, are you finding that anybody's messed with your algorithms or whatever's the proper term, in your machines?
No, we are not finding that. Look, any individual device may need something like recalibration. Any individual, but that's the purpose of logic and accuracy test, to make sure that the devices are functioning as they are intended to. And if anything is not operating as it should, you discover it during the logic and accuracy test, you pull that machine aside, you do a further investigation and see where the problem is, fix it or hold it separate.
But if you came back afterwards, did you ever find like, oh my, like this is horrible, this machine's been out there for 2 weeks and we don't really know what's accurate?
No, we have not found that, and I think if that had happened, you all would know about it, the Secretary of State would be on top of it, and there would be full investigations, not only by the Secretary of State, but the Attorney General's office as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Thank you so very much. It was very helpful.
Thank you.
The chair calls Christopher Velashan from ES&S. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Christopher Walashin. I am a Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Election Systems and Software. ES&S provides election technology and support to 142 Texas counties. I'm here today to share facts and answer questions about the ES&S hardware and software that's used in Texas counties, and again, answer any questions you may have. On a personal note, I've been a cybersecurity professional for 20-plus years. I'm also a retired military officer with 30 years of active duty service. For any member who is a veteran or maybe has a family member that's a veteran, I thank you for your service and sacrifice. It means a lot. ES&S has been in business for more than 45 years. All we do is manufacture and support election technology that is secure, auditable, accurate, and ensures voter privacy and ballot secrecy. ES&S is 100% American-owned and operated, and we supply election technology to jurisdictions in 42 states and 4 of the 5 U.S. territories. Our headquarters are in Omaha, Nebraska, and we employ about 550 people located both in Nebraska and in the states where we do business. We manufacture voter-verifiable paper-based vote tabulation systems, electronic poll books, ballot on demand, voter registration systems, and we print millions of paper ballots used across the country each election cycle. We have more than 30 federally certified versions of hardware and software in use in the field across the United States today. The state of elections in Texas can be described in 4 words: secure, accurate, transparent, and auditable. Through a partnership with the Texas Secretary of State's office, ES&S submits election technology for rigorous testing and certification by the Secretary of State's team. And once certified, our systems can be used by all 142 Texas counties we support. In doing so, Texas voters can be assured that their votes are counted as cast. and all elections can be audited in accordance with state law. Now, as been reported, during the November 2024 general election, an issue arose with some ES&S electronic poll books used in Texas. Following a review of that issue, the Secretary of State's office issued a decertification of that particular version of electronic poll book software used in the state. ES&S accepted responsibility for that issue, and we immediately took corrective action. We have prepared a new, updated version of the electronic poll book software, which corrects those issues noted by the Secretary of State. And we have submitted that for new state certification. We hope it will be used in Texas very soon. We are proud of the work that we've done in support of the elections in the state of Texas, and we are committed to continually enhancing the performance, security, accuracy, and accessibility of our products for the long run. We look forward to working with this committee and with the Secretary of State's office to support election officials all across the state of Texas, but especially the voters of Texas. I would like to now answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Ms. Swanson?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. And so I wanted to give you a chance to address anything else, whether your machines had ever been hacked. Well, first of all, okay, your machines cannot be hooked up to the internet, right? Not the machines that you vote on and not the counting tabulators, right?
That's correct. So those ballot marking devices that Representative Toth was talking about, they are a assistive device that allow voters to make selections on a touch screen, and then a paper ballot card is printed. Those do not connect to the internet in any way, shape.
And
they
not
cannot.
the tabulators either,
The,
right?
the tabulators, we make two kinds, a precinct tabulator for a small county that maybe has 1,500 registered voters, and then a very large, high-speed central count scanner. None of those devices that are sold and used in Texas can connect to the internet in any way, shape, or form. There are a handful of states where state law allows for the unofficial transmission of election night results. States like Wisconsin, Rhode Island, Florida, Michigan, and a few others, where state law allows their counties to transmit unofficial results at the end of Election Day after the polls have closed. And those devices use a private circuit that is not the public internet to transmit results from the polling place to the county office. That's only in a handful of states. Those do not exist in the state of Texas.
How do we make sure that you're not sending us the wrong machines?
Well, there is a rigorous manufacturer and quality assurance process in place. Our contract with the state of Texas or the counties would stipulate that there are modems installed in the machines, that there's the specialized software required to operate the modem, and that the county had a contract with Verizon or AT&T to connect to transmit those results. None of that exists in any county in the state of Texas.
Okay. Have your machines ever been hacked in person?
Our modern version of election technology that's been built in the last 4 or 5 years has never been hacked in any way, shape, or form. Now, machines that we built 20 years ago, before cybersecurity was a thing, they've shown up on eBay and at refurbishment websites, and occasionally one has shown up in a conference room in a Las Vegas hotel where energetic hackers with unlimited time and specialized tools have been able to break into these 15 and 20-year-old machines and manipulate their operation. But none of our modern technology has ever been hacked in any way, shape, or form that would influence the outcome of an election.
And no Texas counties are using your old generation machines?
No, they are not, thank goodness.
All right. Another question I would have is, because of the difference in how the ballots get numbered and your check-in system, your machines had the unfortunate capability of counting the same ballot like an infinite number of times. And I was thinking that y'all were working on something to make that not possible anymore. How is that going?
Yes, our modern tabulators have an ability to spray a number as on the ballot as it is tabulated to allow for things like post-election audits. There are processes in place in the counting station to prevent an individual from feeding multiple ballots into a machine. Like my friend Sam from Hart said, poll workers are the front line of defense when it comes to detecting illegal or unauthorized actions in the polling place. Our machines, the modern version of machines, have been designed to spray a unique number on there to prevent, to afford post-election auditing and to prevent counting of multiple ballots.
So that would happen in the tabulators? Where would, and how many counties are using that?
I don't have the exact number of counties that have purchased our latest model of equipment, but in a typical county and in the elections that I've supported and observed, one ballot per one voter. When a voter checks in, they're handed a ballot or a ballot card. If they try to vote more than once, procedures within the polling place and trained election officials would observe that and prevent that from happening.
Now, I'm not talking about a voter trying to. I'm talking about somebody in, say, Central Count, just as we saw on, TV over and over again, where in various counties in 2020 that they were counting the same ones 3 times. And so explain to me what you've done. I know there's something sprays, but I'm unclear when that happens and where, and
Sure,
how are you keeping unethical or sloppy workers from counting your ballots, over and over again?
Sure. So the number that our modern tabulators spray on that ballot make it so that an observer could see that that ballot has been passed through a tabulator.
Okay.
Counties in Texas do a great job of bipartisan observation of high-speed counters in the count rooms, things like that. The process that a county official might use in training those observers is to watch for ballots moving from left to right as they are entered into the tabulator, as they are boxed up and placed in a batch form. There's a process in place to detect and keep that box of ballots from going through again. And at the end of the night, when the audit takes place or in subsequent days, there will be a mismatch between the number of ballots cast and number of ballots counted, which would instigate, I think, a audit of that polling place or that counting station.
Okay, so what does it look like when it sprays that? And it sounds like you're telling me that your machines still don't kick out as opposed to like kicking it out, saying that, the machine recognizes it's already counted it. It's still up to human error to watch and make sure. Is that correct? That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Yes, that is correct.
What does it look like then? How noticeable would it be is it a big red X or some little tiny thing?
No, it's a number maybe between 1/4 and 1/2 inch high, sprayed in the corner of the ballot as it passes through the tabulator. It allows that ballot to be located for post-election audits. If a ballot were to pass through that machine again, it would have a second number sprayed on it, which would obviously be a visual indication that that ballot had already been counted once.
It's clear, it's red, I would love to see what one looks like.
It's black ink, can be a random number up to 10, 12 digits. It's configurable by
Okay.
the county.
Okay. My last question is, you did mention, now keep in mind, like most of the members, other than Representative Busey or Vice Chairman Busey and I were not on the committee last time. Some, have been on previously. So talk to us about what was the problem that your e-poll book got decertified? What have you done to fix it? And just fill us in on all that.
Sure. So on Election Day, our employees, about 500 employees, and then probably another 300 to 400 contractors, fan out across the country and are in the polling places, in the count rooms, where elections are happening. Early on Election Day, we got word that a couple of precincts in Dallas County were having issues with the poll book printing more than one ballot card per voter. So as you sit in front of the electronic poll book, it's a tablet.
Right.
A Microsoft Surface Go type tablet. It's got our software on there in the operating system. As a voter checks in and the poll worker validates that the voter is in the right place, that they haven't voted early or before, and then they press a button on the tablet to print out the ballot card, which is the voter's proper precinct, polling place, candidates and races, things like that. If you've ever interacted with a computer or a tablet before, you get that little circle that starts to spin to say
Right.
it's processing. And in this case, in a handful of these voting precincts, that print ballot card was pressed more than once per voter. And so multiple ballot cards printed out on the ballot card printer next to the electronic poll book.
That was like accidentally done by a worker or
Yeah.
fraudulently?
No, I don't think there was no indication, a thorough investigation by the Secretary of State and the Dallas County officials, no fraudulent activity. I think an impatient poll worker perhaps, but it was a problem that our poll book didn't recognize that, multiple pushes. So we fixed that right away. As soon as we found out about it, we had people on the ground in Dallas County that communicated that to our company. Our development team jumped on it right away and rewrote that software to allow only one push per ballot, and you'll just have to wait for the ballot to print out. We've developed a fix for that. It's a new version of software that we have submitted to the Secretary of State's office for testing and recertification.
What's the timeline on that?
It's I believe the testing by the Secretary of State's office was conducted yesterday, and we expect a favorable certification within the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you for letting us know all that.
Thank you.
Mr. Toth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ballot paper, is that purchased from you?
It can be. Certain states, and I think Texas is included, prefer to purchase their ballot paper from local or state-run paper mills. Our printing facility in Birmingham, Alabama, contracts with a couple of paper providers, and that's where we print the
What's
majority.
unique about it size-wise?
I'm
Is
sorry?
there anything unique about it size-wise? It's not just like an 8.5 by 11 I can buy at Office Max.
It's the size of the ballot is particular to the state and the election that's being run. Some can be 11 inches long, 14, 17, 19. In places like New York City, it could be up to 5 pages.
But I guess what I'm after is, we ran out of paper, and we went to Voter Central at Harris County, and they wouldn't give us paper. They threatened to have the people arrested for wanting paper. Like, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I don't get that,
I
but yes,
guess
sir.
what I'm asking is, and I'm being snarky, I apologize.
No.
You can't run over to Office Max and buy paper, can you?
We would recommend that you follow the specific specifications for our ballot paper, the thickness, the weight. There's a lot that goes into it so that a tabulator will recognize it. And for the customers that we supply with ballot paper, we take extra steps to make sure that they don't run out.
Have you heard of states running out of paper before? I mean, is this
Yes.
like a common, this happens a lot like it does in Harris County?
Not a lot, but it does happen infrequently, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Swanson?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Remind me, I've honestly forgotten, between your company and Hart InterCivic, which one is which as far as one of you, I think, requires that the paper be bought from your company and one allows you to go out and get it from other vendors?
So we of course encourage customers to buy ballot paper from us because we can manage the specifications and the printing and the quality and all of that. We also work with a number of partner printers across the country in states where they require that ballot paper be provided by a local a local printer. I'm not aware of the HART policy that accepts or rejects one or another, but ES&S, we both sell ballot paper and work with a number of paper suppliers across the country.
Okay, and I do want to clarify as far as the really bad problem we had. I think that was November of '22 when so many voting locations in Harris County ran out of paper, especially out in the suburban areas, my area in particular, but many others in the suburbs. There was plenty of paper. It was just in a warehouse, and the elections administrator refused to let it be distributed. So that was not the fault of either yours or Hart's. That was the fault of the local elections administrator. And fortunately, we passed 2 Senate bills. I'm sure you're very aware of that Senator Paul Bettencourt wrote, and the House passed out. They became law that did apply only to Harris County and did away with the elections administrator and sent those elections back to the elected county clerk and the elected voter registrar and the tax assessor collector. And as of our interim hearings and all, we were getting very good reports from Christina Adkins that the complaints had stopped. So I just wanted to clarify for those who didn't realize that we've actually accomplished good things in this committee. So thank you.
I believe that too.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir, very much. That was really
Thank you,
helpful.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair calls Laura Rogers from the County and District Clerks Association of Texas. Thanks for making it back.
Thank you. I'm a little out of breath.
That's all right. We know you ran from the Senate. Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Rogers, and I'm the County and District Clerk for Sherman County. I also serve as the Elections Legislative Chair for the County and District Clerks Association. I would like to thank you for your invitation to speak and look forward to working with each of you throughout this session. I am here today to offer my assistance to you in matters concerning elections with a perspective on running elections in small rural counties. Being in the Texas Panhandle offers many unique challenges when it comes to the election process. We experienced the second largest wildfire in U.S. history during the 2024 March primary. And while my county was thankfully not affected, my neighbors and fellow clerks were. Multiple county election officials pulled together to make sure the election process was not only operative but secure. I have 1,400 registered voters in Sherman County, with 4 polling locations on Election Day, including 3 precinct barns that contain road equipment and material. I oversee 12 election workers spread out over 900 miles, all while supporting my county court, district court, probate court, vital statistics office, and voter registration office, all with only 2 full-time staff members. My early voting location is like a small town reunion, where people visit in the halls and catch up on small town talk, like our chances for another state football championship, or how much corn is selling for, and if it will ever rain again. We can tell when football practice is over because all the coaches come in to vote at the same time. Being such a small county, ballot secrecy becomes a top priority. Sherman County is a precinct-based voting county, but we strongly support countywide polling. It is not uncommon for us to issue only 1 or 2 mail ballots with the same ballot style, or for precincts to have all identical ballots voted. Therefore, we face many of the same secrecy problems in precinct-based voting as they do in countywide counties. We also support legislation that would add criminal penalties to the misuse of information gained through an open records request. Our association has worked with Senator Hall on SB 1475, which would require every election official in Texas to receive a minimum of 10 hours of continuing education per year. As a combination clerk, my time is split between many different duties that are all important functions in my office, and it is sometimes easy to get focused on one subject while something else goes overlooked. This bill will call for election-focused education for every county, both large and extremely small. Ensuring that important election information is shared across Texas will provide more consistency and uniformity in election procedures and standards while raising the quality of our election officials. Elections are not always a one-size-fits-all operation, but the County and District Clerks Association is committed to finding opportunities to support standardized best practices for election. One issue we're supportive of is the standardization of the logic and accuracy testing that is performed before any election equipment is utilized. Safeguarding election equipment and ensuring integrity and accuracy is a top priority for our association. Guaranteeing fair and transparent elections in counties of all shapes, sizes, and diversities is our association's theme for this session. November 2024 was a great success for both voters and election officials in Texas. We look forward to building upon that success, and I would encourage you to reach out to the experts here today for any questions or concerns that may come up over the next few meetings. Working together, we can preserve the integrity of our elections for generations to come. Thank you again, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Members, any questions? One of the benefits of going last.
I got off easy.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. We appreciate you running over
Sure,
here. We know
thank
that's
you.
a little hectic. Members, that concludes today's agenda. A reminder that this is our regular meeting room and day at 10:30 or upon final adjournment. We will hear bills next week, so please be prepared. Is there any further business for the committee to address? If not, the chair moves to adjourn. Is there objection? Hearing none, the committee stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.